Chapter 1989. Many thanks for Senior Zhu's help. Xiaohua bowed and said, "All right, Xiaohua, go back and meditate. Make preparations for your departure. After we discuss it, we will inform you as soon as we have a schedule," Chunyi instructed. Xiaohua knew that the four of them were going to discuss something, so he bowed and left. After returning to the pavilion, Xiaohua sneered. How could he not know? Xie Zhiqian and Chang Yefeng had the lowest cultivation among the four of them. If there were any trivial matters or dangerous things to do, they would definitely go first. Now that Xiaohua was here, he would be the one probing them. They would be a bit safer. As for Chunyi, Xiaohua had already thought it through, so he didn't feel like thinking about it anymore. "You guys can laugh secretly," Xiaohua secretly said. "I don't know who will have the last laugh. However, this Senior Zhu has a good heart. He repeatedly stopped me from going. Unfortunately, he can't stop the other three. I have to give up." Xiaohua had a good impression of Zhu Chenghe, but where are they going? What treasure are they looking for? How do they know there is skying grass? Knowing the difficulty of this trip, Xiaohua put all his doubts in the bottom of his heart. Taking advantage of the last bit of leisure, he practiced the soul stab technique to perfection. After another 10 days, Chunyi came with Chun Kuei to call Xiaohua. When Xiaohua arrived in front of the mountain gate of Burial Flower Manor, Zhu Chenghe and the other three were already standing in front. Seeing Xiaohua come over, Chunyi asked, "Xiaohua, are you ready? We are going to leave now. If you regret it, it's not too late. You just have to wait for me in the manor." Junior has already thought it over. Senior Chang is right. Asking for help is better than asking for help. Junior will go with you seniors. I hope you seniors will help me. Xiaohua bowed and replied, Since it's like this, let's go." Chun-Yi waved her hand, and a mirror-like brilliance flashed in her hand. It quickly rushed into the air, and a ripple of water appeared in front of her. Chun-Yi raised her leg, stepped over the water, and disappeared in the air. "Xiaohua, our trip to that place this time is very secretive. You must pay attention to keeping it a secret. Along the way, you must listen to our instructions. You must not send any messages to the outside and reveal our whereabouts," Zhu Chenghe said coldly. "If this old master finds anything inappropriate, don't blame this old master for being ruthless. Junior understands. Junior will follow Senior Zhu's words." Xiaohua was scared and quickly bowed. Zhu Chenghe ignored him and also stepped over the water. "Let's go, young man." Xie Zhiqian glanced at Xiaohua with a smile, and then left with Chang Yefeng. Xiaohua tilted his head slightly and looked at the door of Burial Flower Manor again. He also walked out of the formation. He was a little puzzled in his heart. The beauty-retaining grass was poisoned. He didn't know if Chunyi had found the culprit, but she left Burial Flower Manor so easily. If that person, for example, the Sunqian that Chunyi mentioned, came to make trouble again, would Burial Flower Manor be able to withstand it? The more chaotic it is, the better. Xiaohua curled his lips and acted as if this matter had nothing to do with him. When they came out of the magic array of Burial Flower Manor, there was a flying boat among the flowers and plants. This flying boat was different from the drifting cloud flying boat. There was a bulging part on it, like a cabin. Seeing that Chunyi and others were already standing on it, Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He flew up and silently stood beside Xie Zhiqian and was very respectful. "We are going to set off." Zhu Chenghe seemed to be talking to himself, but he also seemed to be talking to the others. With a wave of his hand, a multicolored light flew out from his sleeve and landed on the entire airship. The airship suddenly rose up, circled in the air, and then flew toward the east. As the airship ascended into the sky, it gradually became invisible and disappeared. About 1,000 feet away from the flying boat, between a cluster of verdant green leaves, there was a mountain rock that was about 10 feet wide that emitted a faint yellow light. It was like melting snow, and the figure of a cultivator appeared from the mountain rock. As the cultivator took off his cloak, the female cultivator with wrinkled skin and white hair was revealed. She was the Sunqian that Chunyi mentioned. Strange. Chun-Yi, that slut, actually ignored the safety of Burial Flower Manor and followed a few strange cultivators? That little foundation establishment cultivator also followed them. Sunqian was very puzzled, and her gaze fell on the magic array of Burial Flower Manor. Could it be that she has something important to do? Or she just set up a trap for this old woman? Alas, it's a pity that this old woman's cultivation in magic arrays is still inferior to Chan Yi's. She already found the only flaw in the magic array of Burial Flower Manor. This time, fortunately, this old woman took advantage of the flaw. Otherwise, with Chan Yi's power, this old woman would have been captured by her. What a pity. Even if this old woman has another chance to go in, whether I can come out is another matter. But this old woman destroyed her beauty-retaining grass. How can she survive in the cultivation world of the country of Shi? Burial Flower Manor will really become the place of burial flower. Sun Qian thought for a moment, but still didn't have the courage to go to Burial Flower Manor. She quietly used the 5 elements escape technique to escape far away. Xiaohua stood on the flying boat. Seeing the faint brilliance of the flying boat blocking the astral wind in the sky, he was very envious. His flying skill was excellent, but this kind of long-distance travel consumed a lot of spiritual power. It was far less convenient than using a flying magic tool. If he had this flying boat, he would have already arrived at the seaside with Xue Xue, and he wouldn't have encountered so many things. There are quiet rooms on the flying boat. You can each find one to meditate. This trip will only last for a few days. I can control the flying boat alone. Zhu Chenghe stood with his hands in his sleeves and said coldly. It seemed that he still had a grudge against the 3 people who agreed to let Xiaohua follow them. Well, I still have some magic arts to comprehend, so I won't accompany fellow Zhu. Chunyi chuckled and went into the cabin first. Hee, I'll accompany fellow Zhu for a while. Chang Yefeng said with a smile. I can't do anything in a few days. It's better to chat with fellow Zhu. Xiaohua, you go and cultivate. Xie Zhiqing glanced at Xiaohua and said, this trip is very dangerous. If you can improve a little more, you can save your life a little more. Yes, thank you, Senior, for your guidance. Xiaohua bowed and thanked him. However, this junior wants to ask, where are we going this time? Since we have already set off, can this junior make some preparations? Where? Hee. Zhu Qinghe sneered. Emozhao Black Forest. Emozhao Black Forest? Xiaohua's face turned slightly pale. Emozhao Black Forest was the first dangerous place he heard of. At that time, Ma Qingqing, who was abandoned by heaven, told him that hundreds of individual cultivators in the qi refining stage died at the edge of Emozhao Black Forest. They only obtained the remains of a cultivation method and magic weapon, which gave Xiaohua an extremely dangerous impression. Later, Xiaohua further learned that Emozhao Black Forest was more dangerous than Flame Forest Swamp, Mingxi, Weiming Mountains, and Rising Dawn Mountains. In other places, except for Flame Forest Swamp, Xiaohua went a little deeper with Zhen Yi and others, and Mingxi went a little deeper with Sun Shu's guidance. The other places were just a little bit outside. The other dangerous places were so dangerous, so Emozhao Black Forest was definitely not a good place. According to ordinary cultivators, it was a place where gold core cultivators could enter. What do you think? It's too late to regret now, Zhu Qinghe said mockingly. -8. Chapter 1990. Take a rest first. Chang Yefeng said with a smile. With fellow Taoist Zhu leading the way and us watching over you, you don't have to be afraid. Yes, Junior understands. Xiaohua's face relaxed slightly as he forced a smile and stepped into the cabin. Inside the cabin, as Zhu Qinghe said, there were several small quiet rooms on both sides. Xiaohua randomly picked a room, opened the restriction, and sat down cross-legged with a calm face as he quietly pondered. After a while, Xiaohua's eyes lit up as he swept the room with his divine sense. With a wave of his hand, he took out a jade slip. It was the contents of the jade slip he had copied from Jinqing. Immediately after, he immersed his divine sense into it and carefully examined it for a long time. A smile appeared on his face, but soon after, he was startled and revealed a trace of astonishment. He immersed his divine sense into the jade slip again and seemed to have discovered something special. Time passed very quickly. Unknowingly, several days had already passed. Xiaohua had already stored the jade slip into his space. He was still practicing the soul-piercing technique. On this day, the hull of the boat suddenly shook violently. Then, it stopped. Huh, have we arrived? Xiaohua stood up and thought to himself, however, I don't know if this place is close to the place Marshal Uncle Jin gave me. Xiaohua walked out of the quiet room, but before he could speak, he was stunned by the scene in front of him. The place in front of him was a continuous mountain range. This mountain range was overgrown with forests. It was emerald green, and countless faint clouds lingered on it. It was incomparably beautiful. However, in this place, there were thousands of cultivators who were divided into two groups and confronting each other. Each of them had activated their yellow talismans, magic tools, magic weapons, and other treasures. Not only were there brilliant lights lingering around, but all kinds of sounds were incessant. Both sides were extremely fierce and didn't leave the other side any way out. Screams were accompanied by the sound of magic tools colliding with each other. Bloody light met the light of magic tools, and a tyrannical and terrifying aura filled the entire mountain range. Senior Zhu, what's going on? Xiaohua asked in a low voice. How would this old master know? Zhu Chenghe scolded angrily. When the airboat was about 10 miles away from here, it was stopped by someone and could neither leave nor move forward. This old man wants to ask about it. Xiaohua didn't dare to ask again and could only stand next to Xie Zhiqian and watch. Sure enough, there were several golden core cultivators standing in the air 1,000 feet in front of the flying cloud ship. They all held magic treasures in their hands and coldly looked around. There was also a rhombus-shaped flying magic tool several miles away from the flying cloud ship. These cultivators seemed to be disciples of the splendid sect. Chunyi was experienced and knowledgeable. She said in a low voice, one of them looks very familiar. I think I've seen him somewhere before. What are the cultivators of the magnificent flower sect doing in the vicinity of Inkcloud Black Forest? Who are their opponents? Zhu Chenghe was somewhat puzzled. His eyes flickered. We just happened to be here. Could it be? As he spoke, he looked at the golden core cultivators in the distance. I'm afraid we won't be able to force our way in. Chang Yefeng smiled bitterly. These people are all at the middle stage of the gold core realm, and the other two are at the late stage of the gold core realm. Motherfucker, these old monsters are about to be pregnant. Why are they still out here? What do they want to do? Boom. There was a loud sound. In a place slightly closer to the flying cloud ship, an early-stage golden core cultivator took out a magic treasure. Countless huge rolling logs flew out from the magic treasure. These rolling logs flashed with a strong green brilliance and smashed towards his opponent. His opponent was holding a flat magic treasure the size of a palm. Drops of true water also flew out from the magic treasure, trying to block the huge logs. However, it was clear that the power of the giant tree was beyond his imagination. The waves formed by the primordial water were smashed into pieces by the giant tree, and he himself was also hit by the giant tree. Although his body flashed with a protective blue light, he was still smashed into a bloody mess and fell from the sky. Strange. Xiaohua was a little shocked. They are all golden core cultivators. Their magic treasures and magic treasures are not too different. With the protection of the defensive brilliance, it is impossible to kill them directly. How can this splendid sect disciple kill his opponent directly? Could it be that this disciple's cultivation is close to the nascent soul stage? Obviously, Zhu Chenghe and the others also noticed the strange scene. Their faces were very gloomy. Xie Zhiqian smiled bitterly and said, the splendid sect is indeed a famous sect in the country of Shi. I'm afraid my immortal ascension sect is not as good as them. Chang Yefeng didn't say anything, but Chenny frowned and looked around as if she was looking for something. Fellow Taoists, secretly release your divine sense. After a moment, Chenny whispered, see if the spiritual energy here is a bit strange. Xiaohua naturally wouldn't stand out. He quietly watched. Sure enough, after a short while, Zhu Chenghe sneered and said, it really is slightly strange. The wood element spirit energy of the heavens and the earth here is extraordinarily abundant, and it's simply comparable to an abode. Under such circumstances, how could a water element magic treasure resist a wood element magic treasure? If the splendid sect disciple has a little secret technique, it is not strange that he can directly kill a cultivator of the same cultivation level. But the question is, why is the spiritual energy here so rich? Why does the splendid sect want to kill these opponents? Chani bit her lips and said, moreover, since we have encountered this matter, if it were up to me, those golden core cultivators of the splendid sect should have killed us long ago to prevent this matter from spreading out. But they didn't do it, and just didn't allow us to intervene. In other words, they didn't mind us watching. The matter here is really interesting. I'm afraid the splendid sect has taken a fancy to this paradise and wants to drive away the cultivators here. Chang Yefeng didn't know the situation in the country of Shi and guessed. Xie Zhiqian shook his head slightly. I don't know what kind of sect is here. Although Foundation establishment cultivators make up the majority, but such a force is definitely not a cultivation family. Spirit Stone Vein. This thought suddenly flashed through Xiaohua's mind. He had just left Tianmin Mountain and had a deep memory of the rise and fall of Tianmin Mountain's Huang family. It was very easy for him to think of this. Gee, a sharp sound came from a magic treasure in the hand of a splendid sect golden core cultivator who was watching from afar. Following the sound of the golden core cultivator, the disciples of the splendid sect who were fighting withdrew their magic power at the same time and escaped from the battle. They flew back more than 10 feet and then began to fly in different directions. From afar, they looked like scattered but orderly flies. Formation attack. Xiaohua understood at a glance. He had already seen this formation when he was in Mingxi. Sure enough, in the blink of an eye, several hundred cultivators had already formed a formation in picturesque disorder. Looking at the cultivators on the other side, they were also flustered and impatiently flying in formation. However, compared to the order of the splendid sect, they were still far inferior. Gee, the golden core cultivator angrily shouted. Following his hand gesture, the magic treasure he took out screeched in the air and rushed into the formation of the cultivators on the other side. At the same time, as if issuing a command, all the disciples of the splendid sect roared in unison. The magic treasures, and yellow talismans in their hands all attacked together. These things actually formed the shape of a fist and attacked the cultivators on the other side in an orderly manner. In contrast to the cultivators of the splendid sect, the cultivators on the other side reacted somewhat hastily and even somewhat disorderly. The magic treasures and other things that were sent flying didn't even reach half of the distance before they were suppressed by the magic power of the fist formed by the magic treasures of the splendid sect. Their speed and power gradually decreased. Good heavens, this is a powerful method. Xiaohua saw that this method of attack was simply incomparable to the cultivators of Mingxi. He couldn't help but inwardly sigh. If he encountered such a formation in Mingxi, he definitely wouldn't be able to charge through. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The fist knocked down the scattered magic treasures. The cultivators on the other side all fell from the air. Among them, 30% of the cultivators never flew again. The other cultivators scattered like birds and beasts and fled in panic. Hey, where did this cultivator come from? You dare to bully my fallen deer mountain? With a roar, a rainbow-like brilliance flew over from the distance. However, when the brilliance dissipated, a middle-stage golden core old man with disheveled hair and a red face appeared. He looked at the several golden core cultivators on Xiaohua's side in astonishment. Clearly, he didn't notice these people with his divine sense. Fellow Taoist Kong? The old man's eyes were somewhat alarmed. He stared at one of the golden core cultivators and asked in disbelief, "Why does your splendid sect covet my fallen deer mountain's foundation?" Fellow Taoist Ming. The so-called fellow Taoist Kong unhurriedly took several steps forward and sneered, "I didn't expect you to remember me after meeting me in Flame Forest Swamp. However, since you and I are fated to meet, I'll give you a word of advice. The Spirit Stone Mine in Liao Ming Mountain Range already belongs to my splendid sect. If fellow Taoist Ming is tactful, I won't be ruthless. Take these fallen deer mountain disciples and quickly leave. Liao Ming Mountain Range is my fallen deer mountain's foundation. How can you give it away just because of a few words from your splendid sect?" The cultivator surnamed Ming was somewhat indignant and unwilling. "Fellow Taoist Ming, whether you leave or not is up to you. That's all I have to say." The cultivator surnamed Kong ignored him and retreated with a flick of his sleeve. The cultivator surnamed Ming's eyes narrowed. He looked at the golden core cultivators on guard, and then looked at the fleeing fallen deer mountain disciples who were looking at him in an extremely sorry state. He sighed and turned his head. Once again, he transformed into a rainbow and quickly flew in the direction he came from. The other fallen deer mountain disciples also flew up and followed behind the cultivator surnamed Ming. However, many of them were unwilling to give up and looked back. The weak are prey to the strong. This was the only thought in Xiao Hua's mind. Spirit stone mine? The fallen deer mountain cultivator's voice wasn't soft. Chen Yi, Zhu Qinghe, and the others also heard him. They looked at each other with shock and even greed on their faces. Soon after, the several hundred splendid sect disciples landed in the mountain range and disappeared. The cultivators blocking the flying ship also left without paying any attention to Zhu Qinghe and the others. -8. Chapter 1991. How could Xianghua sect forcibly occupy Deer Descent Mountain's Spirit Stone Vein? The flying boat flew for a long time before everyone finally calmed down. Although the battle just now was not too big, the situation was really strange. Zhu Qinghe unconsciously frowned and looked at Chani. Indeed, the Spirit Stone Vein in the country of Xi is so small that it has long been controlled by various large sections. Moreover, for hundreds of thousands of years, a kind of balance has been formed. Xianghua sect is not likely to act rashly. Chunyi was also puzzled. I'm afraid Xianghua sect is coveting Deer Descent Mountain? Chang Yefeng asked hesitantly. Impossible. If Xianghua sect wants to annex Deer Descent Mountain, Xuanyan School and Qiqiao sect will be the first to disagree. Chunyi shook her head. Moreover, Xianghua sect did not kill the disciples of Deer Descent Mountain. Even that cultivator surnamed Ming was released by Xianghua sect. It seems like their target is the Spirit Stone Vein. Snatching the Spirit Stone Vein will definitely cause an imbalance between the three cultivation sects in the country of Xi. Zhu Qinghe said curiously, Xianghua sect is drinking poison to quench their thirst. Not necessarily. Chani sneered. She looked at the darkness far away from the astral winds. Perhaps other sects have the same idea. Ah? Zhu Qinghe and the others were not as confused as Xiaohua. Even Chang Yefeng and Xie Zhiqian understood something from this sentence. They were shocked and secretly cried out in their hearts. Then, they fell silent, as if thinking about something. Xiaohua could not think of too many disputes. Seeing that the four of them were silent, he did not ask anything. He only thought about how to protect himself when he reached Inkcloud Black Forest. Several hours later, the darkness in the distance was getting closer. Xiaohua could see clearly that the darkness did not only cover the mountain rocks and trees, but also the air was faintly filled with a black fog. Even the sunlight that shone into the depths of Inkcloud Black Forest reflected a faint black light. A kind of solemnity, a kind of sadness, a kind of fear, and even a kind of fear quietly emerged from the bottom of Xiaohua's heart. Fellow Zhu, we are about to reach the Inkzhao Black Forest. Are we going to enter from the edge? Chunyi's expression had returned to normal as she asked with a smile, what can we do if we don't enter from the edge? Zhu Qinghe smiled bitterly. If Manor Headchen has a shortcut, that would be the best. You don't say. I do have a small secret path. Chunyi pursed her lips and smiled. Really? Zhu Qinghe was overjoyed. He clapped his hands and said, I'm afraid the edge of the Inkcloud Black Forest is hundreds of miles long, and there are dangers lurking everywhere. Although it's nothing for Gold Core Realm practitioners like us, it's still troublesome. If Manor Headchen has a shortcut to enter the forest, it's great that we can concentrate on dealing with the dangers inside. What about my share? Can I have an extra portion? Chunyi widened her eyes and asked with watery eyes. Manor Lord Chen, why didn't you tell me earlier that you have a secret path into Inkcloud Black Forest? Chang Yefeng was a little displeased. We've already discussed all the details. Isn't it a little too much for the Manor Lord to suddenly make a request when we're already here? Is that so? Forget it. Chunyi was not angry. She smiled and said, Fellow Zhu didn't mention it at that time, and I didn't think about it. Now I just remembered that if Fellow Zhu doesn't agree, we'll follow Fellow Zhu and enter the forest according to the route he took last time. How about this? Zhu Chenghe thought for a while and said, "Last time I entered the edge of the ink-cloud black forest, it took me a lot of effort. Now that there are more people, it will be more troublesome. Since I asked too little, I'll give half of my share to Manor Head Chun. What do you think?" "Hee hee, that's great." Chunny wasn't courteous and agreed with a smile, and then she clapped her hand and took out a crystalline jade spoon before she said to Zhu Chenghe, "Fellow Taoist Zhu, stop the flying boat. I'll find the location of the secret path." When Zhu Chenghe stopped the flying boat, everyone got out of the flying boat. They saw Chun Yi's hands forming a wonderful incantation. Every finger seemed to be dancing beautifully. As the spiritual power passed, the jade spoon turned into a woman less than 3 inches tall wearing a seamless heavenly robe. The woman's eyebrows were clear and her skin was as white as snow. Her figure flew with the brilliance, fluttering her sleeves as she flew toward the dark place in the distance. Her speed was not inferior to a cultivator at the middle stage of foundation establishment. "Hee hee, let's go." Seeing Jade Maiden fly, countless lights scattered in the air and turned into specks of flowers, Chun Yi revealed a smile. Her figure was actually the same as Jade Maiden's. She waved her Taoist robe and chased after her. "Let's go." Zhu Chenghe looked at Chun Yi's narcissistic appearance and slightly shook his head. He waved his sleeves and led everyone to fly down. Xiaohua leisurely followed beside Xie Zhiqian. He slightly released his Buddhist sense and carefully guarded against everything in the vicinity. Hearing Chun Yi's words, Zhu Chenghe and others arranged everything. The division of the 4 people was also completely agreed. Only the heavenly ink grass was left for Xiaohua. As the jade girl flew closer to the ink Zhao black forest, Xiaohua felt his eyes gradually darkening. Although the sun was really high up in the sky, there seemed to be something in the sky near the ink Zhao black forest that could not pass through light. It could even be said that it was something that could absorb light, blocking the light, but Xiaohua carefully examined it. Not only his divine sense, but also his Buddhist sense could not see anything. Even if he used his Dharma eye to examine it, he could only see a little bit of dark thing. It was exactly the same as what he saw with his naked eyes. After a while, Xiaohua felt somewhat strange. Usually, his true essence flowed smoothly in his meridians, but here, his true essence was unexpectedly somewhat obscure. It was as if sand was mixed in the river. Although it did not affect the river water, it always had a kind of heavy feeling. No wonder only foundation establishment and golden core cultivators can come to the ink Zhao black forest. Xiaohua somewhat understood. Qi refining cultivators' meridians are filled with true qi. When these black things enter the body, it is like a huge rock blocking the true qi, affecting the use of magic power. And in the body of foundation establishment cultivators, it can only be treated as gravel. As for golden core cultivators, all of their magic power is in the golden core. These black things may not necessarily enter the body. However, Xiaohua's true essence was originally filled with many black spots of earth crystal Yao milk. When these inexplicable things entered his meridians, it only made Xiaohua somewhat obscure. It actually did not have any effect. Even these black spots were absorbed by the earth crystal Yao milk, increasing little by little. Fellow Taoist Zhu, it should be here. When the jade girl flew to a certain distance from the ink Zhao black forest, it stopped. It hovered in the air and did not move forward. Chun covered it with her sleeve, and the jade girl turned back into a jade spoon and fell into her hand. -8. Chapter 1992. This place doesn't look any different. Xiao Huayu looked around and saw that the coarse soil was suffused with a dim light. Low, clawing vines clung tightly to the ground. The thumb-sized leaves on them were uneven, and there were all kinds of shapes. The thick trees in front of them were so thick that several people could wrap their arms around them. The trees were not perfectly straight. Some were twisted, some were slanted, and the branches were crisscrossed. Strange birdsong could be heard from the sides or in front of them, rising and falling one after another. Suddenly, there was the sound of wind, lifting up the branches and leaves, making one feel a chill. Zhu Chenghe clapped his hands, and a green light flew out from his storage bag. It was a palm-sized jade flask. Under the activation of his dermic powers, the jade flask spewed out a silvery white light. The light was like a fountain that poured down from the top of Zhu Chenghe's head, protecting him. Xiao Hua could clearly see that the light was slightly wrinkled and reflected light. It was actually in the form of granules, which seemed to be able to block out the black things in the Inkzhao Black Forest. Xiao Hua, the ink sand in the Inkzhao Black Forest is very strange. The deeper you go, the more there are. Not only does the ink sand drill into your meridians, but it can also block the circulation of true essence and even corrode it. It also seeps into your meridians, making your entire body heavier. In the end, your entire body won't be able to move. Xie Zhiqian reminded Xiao Hua from the side. Normal protective light can't block the ink sand. You're a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect, so if you're not of the lightning attribute, then you're of the fire attribute. If you release your protective lightning or fire, it should be effective. As he spoke, Xie Zhiqian also clapped his hand, and a strange magic tool that looked like a gourd appeared. A layer of faint, flame-like spirit light protected Xie Zhiqian. Seeing everyone take out their methods, Xiao Hua felt bitter. He only knew that he was coming to the Inkzhao Black Forest on the flying boat, so he didn't make any preparations. In the burial flower manor, there was clearly time to explain, but no one said a word to him. Now that he was here, they wanted him to take out his methods. It was clearly bullying. Gij, Chenny was wearing a tricolored robe, and the cloud-like mist enveloped her inside. She flew to Xiao Hua's side and said with a smile, "Xiao Hua, it's not that I don't want to remind you, but I thought that this place was hidden and I couldn't let you out of Burial Flower Manor. Since you can't go out, what's the use of telling you? If you have any tricks up your sleeve, use them for now. Otherwise, I have a Yusha that can block Emo Sha as well." After saying that, Chun Yi took out a thin robe and handed it to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua knew that since a golden core cultivator had to take out a magic weapon to protect himself seriously, his own flame might not necessarily be of use. Thus, he didn't hold back and reached out to grab the silk cloth and put it on with a flip of his hand. He saw that the silk cloth was thin and tight, producing a faint brilliance that blocked the ink sand, making it seem as if he wasn't wearing it at all. "Thank you, Manor Lord Chun." Xiao Hua bows and says, "Kid, I really don't have any protective magic treasures here." "Yes, just remember it in your heart." Chun Yi smiled and looked into the ink shadow black forest. "Manor Lord Chen, please lead the way," Zhu Chenghe said in a low voice after releasing his divine sense and looking for a moment. Chun Yi didn't hold back and waved her hand, saying, "Fellow cultivators, please follow me." Then, as if to remind them, she says, "This secret path was discovered by a fellow cultivator by chance. He just told me the general direction and route. This is the first time I've entered it. The secret path is about 100 feet from the ground and about 10 feet in radius. If your divine sense is strong enough, you should be able to find some clues. However, although there is a secret path and we can fly in it, we'd better not go too fast. It is said that the outer diameter of the secret path is very thin. If we attract too much spiritual chi of heaven and earth, the secret path will be destroyed." "What? We can fly in the secret path? We can't fly outside?" Xiao Hua is a little surprised and looks at the dark forest in the distance. The Emo Sha can enter the meridians with the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Although the Emo Sha disappears after leaving the ink shadow black forest, it is obvious that the magic power of ordinary cultivators is greatly reduced in the ink shadow black forest. No wonder ordinary cultivators can't enter it. As for those rogue cultivators, they can only swim in the periphery. While Xiao Hua is thinking, he has already followed Xie Zhiqian into the ink shadow black forest for more than 100 feet. Xiao Hua has a feeling that he is trying to escape through the sand. A faintly discernible repelling force is produced, as if it is trying to squeeze him out of the ink shadow black forest. When no one was paying attention, Xiao Hua opened his Dharma eyes. Just as Chenny had said, the black sand around them was much lighter. It looked like a passageway, about 30 meters above the ground. The edges of the passageway swayed slightly, like seaweed swaying in the water. "Motherfucker, how are these passageways discovered? Do other people have the same Dharma eyes as I do?" Xiao Hua is a little speechless. After flying for another hour, because they are not flying fast and the passage is not leading directly to the inside of the ink shadow black forest, there are some twists and turns, like a small path in the forest. Although it leads to a secluded place, it is still a winding path. Fellow Zhu, don't worry. Although we can fly in this secret passage, it seems to be a little long, Chunyi said in a low voice. Her voice is very loud in the dark, and the crisp chirps in the surroundings are much fainter now, indicating that they have entered the depths of the ink shadow black forest. Well, it's not bad, Zhu Qinghe said with a smile. Although I went in directly last time, I didn't fly so fast or so easily, and I used a lot of magic power. Although this secret passage is a long detour, it is better in that it is easy. Alas, if I came to the ink shadow black forest alone, even if I know that the Sword Immortal's remains are inside, I may not dare to break into the inner layer of the ink shadow black forest. Chang Yifeng sighed in a low voice. The Sword Immortal's remains? Xiao Hua's body trembles, and his eyes are filled with disbelief, looking at Xie Zhiqian beside him. Xie Zhiqian coughed and said in a low voice, Fellow Chang, you should be careful with your words. Hee, we are already at the edge of the ink shadow black forest. Even if Xiao Hua wants to leave, he needs to have the courage to do so. Chang Yifeng sneered, even if he wants to leave, can I let him leave at will? Well, since we are here, I guess fellow Chang also has doubts in your heart, and you want me to explain the reason? Zhu Qinghe understood Chang Yifeng's meaning and thought that Xiao Hua didn't know the truth, so he nodded slightly and said. Then, he looked at the darkness in the distance and said, Since Manor Lord Chen found this secret passage, and we have some free time, let's just kill some time. I will tell you everything, so that you won't be confused. Senior Zhu, thank you for your explanation. Xiao Hua said respectfully, This junior is indeed confused, and I don't know why you came to this dangerous place. Of course, if you don't want to tell me, this junior will just follow you inside. Hee, I didn't tell you before because this matter is too secretive and has something to do with our cultivation. If others knew, especially the cultivators of the 7 Skills sect who use flying swords, I'm afraid we wouldn't have a chance. Zhu Qinghe said with a smile. On the contrary, I know that not many of the cultivators of your Imperial Thunder sect are good at using flying swords, so I'm not afraid to tell you. This is why I agreed to let you come. TCH, Xiao Hua despised him in his heart. If Qinyi and the others didn't have ulterior motives, Zhu Qinghe wouldn't have let him come. However, without waiting for Xiao Hua to speak, Zhu Qinghe said, Xiao Hua, do you know about sword cultivators? Xiao Hua rolled his eyes and shook his head slightly. This junior was previously a loose cultivator in my country of Shi. My cultivation was very shallow and my knowledge was also very limited. I only wanted to cultivate to the 10th layer of Qi refining and enter a cultivation sect. In fact, this junior always wanted to enter the Huanhua sect, but who knew that I would enter the Imperial Thunder sect by accident? However, after entering the Imperial Thunder sect, I discovered that the cultivation sect wasn't a pure land, so this junior buried himself in cultivation. Now that I finally reached foundation establishment, I have the opportunity to come out and experience the world. Hee, I won't hide it from Senior. Presumably, Senior also knows about this junior's junior sister's matter. This junior only cares about matters related to himself, so this junior doesn't know much about sword cultivators. Seeing Xiao Hua's sincere words, as if he was confessing, Zhu Qinghe smiled and nodded. He didn't comment and said, That day when fellow Daoist tested your sword light, did you know? Isn't that a flying sword? This junior naturally knows. Xiao Hua admitted honestly, this junior used a flying sword talisman when I was Qi refining, and there's also a flying sword talisman in my storage pouch. As he spoke, Xiao Hua clapped his hands, as if he was going to take out a flying sword talisman from his storage pouch. Hee, there's no need. Zhu Qinghe said with a smile. The flying sword talisman is only a yellow talisman. It can't be compared to a real flying sword, let alone a spirit sword. Yes, please dispel my doubts, Senior Zhu. Xiao Hua replied in a well-behaved manner. Actually, on my Xiaoyu continent, besides Daoist techniques, there are also sword cultivators, soul cultivators, beast cultivators, and so on. Zhu Qinghe said in a low voice. Xiao Hua, could it be that your master didn't tell you about it? Zhu Qinghe suddenly asked, causing Xiao Hua to be stunned. He slightly opened his mouth and said awkwardly, This junior also asked about it before I reached foundation establishment, but my master said that I only needed to know and cultivate well. First, I had to reach foundation establishment, and then I wouldn't ask about anything else. When this junior reached foundation establishment, he wanted to introduce this junior to the senior sisters of the Imperial Thunder sect. Why didn't this junior just escape? At this point, Xiao Hua's heart trembled, and his forehead was almost covered in sweat. That day, he had told Chenyi about the Feather Immortal Assembly at the Burial Flower Manor, but he didn't seem to have mentioned the matter of Zhang Yuhe and Zhang Yutong. Xiao Hua's eyes turned rapidly, and he repeatedly thought about it. Seeing that Chenyi's flying figure didn't change, he finally relaxed. What a sentimental person. Zhu Chenghe glanced at Chenyi and said, "Sword cultivators are sword cultivators. All of their techniques are related to a flying sword." Then, Zhu Chenghe roughly explained the matter of sword cultivators, and finally said, "Actually, sword cultivators and Taoist techniques aren't completely separated. Within my Dao sect, there are also many cultivators whose magic tools or magic treasures are flying swords. For example, fellow Taoist Xie, fellow Taoist Chong, and I. Moreover, my Dao sect's flying sword technique isn't inferior to sword cultivators' flying swords. Even as early as hundreds of thousands of years ago, there were nascent soul stage experts who went to the Huan country to challenge sword cultivators. -8. Chapter 1993. Huan country. Xiao Hua pretended to be confused. The three cultivation countries are Shi, Meng, and Lian. This Huan country is the land of sword cultivators. Zhu Chenghe glared at Xiao Hua and muttered, "Which pedantic foundation establishment cultivator is your master? He didn't even tell you this. No wonder he can only be a foundation establishment cultivator." Xiao Hua didn't dare to say more and simply pretended to be ignorant. "That cultivator from my Dao sect is very powerful with his flying sword. He actually won all 9 battles in Huan country and returned victorious," Zhu Chenghe said proudly. "Ah? Really?" This was the first time Xiao Hua heard of this. He was shocked. If he defeated a sword cultivator with a Dao technique, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, he actually won with a flying sword. This was a disgrace to sword cultivators. "Which sect is this senior from? He's so powerful," Xiao Hua asked. "Which sect can he be from?" Zhu Chenghe sighed. "Seven Skills sect?" Xiao Hua said without hesitation. Zhu Chenghe glared at him and said, "Do you think only your Shi country's 7 Skills sect knows about flying swords?" "I'm just a frog in a well. Senior, please enlighten me." Xiao Hua scratched his head and said embarrassedly, "It's Ming country's Changbai sect." Chenyi said clearly, 7 Skills sect's flying sword is only because the current sect master, Lu and I, is good at it. Therefore, many disciples cultivate flying swords. However, Changbai sect is established with flying swords. Other Dao techniques are just vassals. So it's like that. Xiao Hua easily thought of Lu Weigang, the Qi refinement disciple who used a flying sword to chase after Sun Shu during the Feather Immortal Gathering. He thought, no wonder. Yes, it's Changbai sect from Ming country. Zhu Chenghe nodded and said, that senior's name is Reverend Brightsword. He should have been an early nascent soul cultivator at that time. Senior Zhu, did you come to a Mozhao Black Forest to find the remains of Reverend Brightsword? Xiao Hua asked curiously. Don't worry. Zhu Chenghe smiled and said, after Reverend Brightsword returned from Huan country, he became famous in Ming country and became the next leader of Changbai sect. As for the Huan kingdom's sword cultivators, they were dejected. Many people began to have doubts about sword cultivators. Of course, Huan country also has spiritual sword and divine sword swordsmen. They can't possibly attack Reverend Brightsword who has a low cultivation level, so they can only think of other methods. However, Reverend Brightsword is indeed powerful. Not only are first-grade sword transformation stage cultivators unable to be his match, even in the final battle against a second-grade sword transformation stage cultivator, who is equivalent to a mid-Yuanying stage cultivator, he was still slightly superior. In an instant, he broke the myth that a sword cultivator's attack power is stronger than a Dao cultivator of the same level. However, It's not like Huan country doesn't have any geniuses. At that time, there was a rising star in Huan country called Li Xiubai. His cultivation was similar to Reverend Brightsword's, and he was also a first-grade sword transformation realm cultivator. This Li Xiubai's innate talent is unrivaled. Since he was young, he had spiritual energy and perseverance. Others only nurture one sword pill. Some extremely powerful ones only nurture 3 at most. They are called the 3 stars glorious sun, but he actually nurtured 9 sword pills in one go. 9. Xiaohua almost cried out in surprise. Wasn't this number the 9 shattered sword pellets he obtained from the deafening Thunder Palace? What's wrong? Seeing Xiaohua's strange expression, Zhu Chenghe asked curiously, AI, this sword cultivator senior. If my master was here, he would definitely reprimand him. Biting off more than you can chew. Xiaohua had a bitter smile on his face. He said empathetically, others cultivating 3 is already the limit, but he actually wants to cultivate 9. This is really beyond this junior's expectations. However, since senior said so, Senior Li Xiubai's 9 flying swords must have been cultivated. This kind of rare genius, this junior, really can't imagine. Humph, not only you, even I find it hard to understand. Zhu Qinghe sneered, other people's 3 sword pills are 3 stars glorious sun, but his 9 sword pills are transit of the sun 9 stars transit of the sun. That's an extremely high realm among sword cultivators. It's the legendary divine sword realm's sword immortal. Since childhood, Li Xiubai's goal was to cultivate to the divine sword realm and become a sword immortal. Chen Yi's face was filled with longing as she said, moreover, under his tenacious nature, under his heaven-gifted genius, those 9 sword pills were born by him one by one. He named them Fledgling Star, Morning Star, Emblem Star, Brilliant Star, Dual Star, Dark Star, Star Destroyer, Star Extinction, and Star Creation. AI, heaven knows, it's already difficult for a sword cultivator to control 3 flying swords. How could he control 9 great spirit swords? That's right, Reverend Brightsword went to Huan country to challenge Li Xiubai. Unfortunately, he went at the wrong time. Li Xiubai actually went to Million Mountains to train. He didn't meet Reverend Brightsword. Zhu Qinghe continued, when he returned to Flame Bamboo Sword Sect and learned about Reverend Brightsword, he was extremely angry and immediately came to Ming country to challenge Reverend Brightsword at Changbai Sect. Good. Xiao Hua's eyes flashed with a trace of brilliance as he praised. That will definitely be a battle that will shock the entire Xiaoyu continent. That's right. At that time, the cultivators of the 3 cultivation countries all heard the news and immediately moved. They wanted to see this battle of sword and Dao that is hard to come by in tens of thousands of years. Zhu Qinghe's face was also filled with longing as he said, all the big sects, big clans, and many famous cities were all eagerly waiting for news about the time and location of the battle to come. Unfortunately, Li Xiubai aggressively went to Ming country and even rushed to Changbai Sect. However, Reverend Brightsword of Changbai Sect treated Li Xiubai with respect and was very humble. However, once Li Xiubai entered Changbai Sect, there was no more news, as if he didn't even appear. Chen Yi said softly in front of them. Until half a year later, Reverend Brightsword and Li Xiubai announced to the world on Changbai Peak that the 2 of them agreed to duel in a secret place. Moreover, they agreed to never announce the result of the duel to the public. At that time, whether it was the 3 cultivation countries or Huan country, all the sword cultivators were in an uproar. Huan country's Flame Bamboo Sword Sect even sent an elder to Changbai Sect in Ming country, as if to urge Senior Li Xiubai. Zhu Qinghe's face was filled with reminiscence as he said, however, when the Flame Bamboo Sword Sect's elder came to Changbai Sect, Reverend Brightsword and Li Xiubai were both gone. Li Xiubai left a jade slip and said that he was going to duel with Reverend Brightsword. As for where he went, Changbai Sect's sect master and elders also didn't know. Flame Bamboo Sword Sect originally thought that Li Xiubai had been used a secret technique by Changbai Sect, but when they saw Li Xiubai's jade slip, they naturally had nothing to say and could only wait on Changbai Peak. This wait lasted for another half a year. Zhu Chenghe sighed and said, until one day, Reverend Brightsword's disciple saw that there was some movement in the sect's messaging secret array. After recognizing that it was Reverend Brightsword who sent the message, he immediately informed the sect master and Flame Bamboo Sword sect's elder. At this time, Reverend Brightsword's life tablet in Changbai sect was also damaged. When Changbai sect's sect master and Flame Bamboo Sword sect's elder saw Reverend Brightsword's nascent soul image transmission, they knew that the duel had already ended. Reverend Brightsword really kept his promise and didn't say a word about the result of the duel. He only arranged some matters in the sect and then turned off the image transmission. -8. Chapter 1994. However, Immortal Brightsword's natal spiritual tablet was damaged, indicating that he had died. Even his nascent soul could not escape. At first, the elder of Flame Bamboo Sword sect thought that Li Xiaobai could win, but after waiting for a long time, Li Xiaobai did not return, so he hurried back to Huan country. It is said that Li Xiaobai's natal spiritual tablet also had a crack. The two of them actually perished together. Immortal Brightsword's last words were not completely spread, but there was a sentence that all the sword cultivators in Ming country knew. Without waiting for Zhu Qinghe to finish, Chang Yefeng and Xie Zhiqian both said in unison, "Sword Dao has no regrets." Yes, it is this sentence. Zhu Qinghe nodded. Although our Taoist sect uses flying swords as magic tools, unlike sword cultivators who use their lives to nurture their swords, they still use their swords as their lives. Immortal Brightsword's sentence really hit the bottom of my heart. Yes, for this battle, all the sects have their own guesses, and there are records in their own ancient books. Chang Yefeng nodded. But what actually happened? No one knows. In order to find the truth, all the sects sent out their forces, first in Ming country, then in Shi country and Lian country, and even in Huan country. We didn't find any trace of it. Zhu Qinghe said again. However, in the end, the head of Changbai sect found clues from Immortal Brightsword's nascent soul and concluded that it was in Shi country's Imozhao Black Forest. It may even be in the core. So, Changbai sect secretly searched Imozhao Black Forest and lost a lot of experts, but still found no trace. Later, this news was discovered by some people, and it was completely leaked, attracting many sword cultivators to come here to search. What was the result? Xiaohua suddenly asked a seemingly extremely stupid question. Chunyi said with a smile, "If they found it, why would we come here today?" Xiaohua said with a smile, "What I mean is, Imozhao Black Forest is so big, and there are thousands of cultivators in Shi country, how could they not find it? Even if Imozhao Black Forest is dangerous, what about Funshin Stage Seniors? What about Deshang Stage Seniors? Can't you just ask any one of them?" "Haha, little friend Xiao, you still don't understand." Xie Zhiqian smiled and said, "I heard that there is a famous rogue cultivator in your country of Shi. I think he is called Old Man Baizhang. His cultivation technique can be cultivated to the foundation establishment stage, which is a great temptation to rogue cultivators. Many rogue cultivators are looking for him. You must have had such a plan back then, right? But if the current you were to ask you to search for his orthodoxy, would you go?" "Yes, I understand." Xiaohua nodded. Taoist Master Brightsword and Li Xiaobai are indeed handsome for a while and can be considered world-shaking. But in front of these seniors, they are still nothing. "Yes, that's one thing," Zhu Qinghe said with a smile. On the other hand, in the three kingdoms of cultivation, Taoist magic cultivation is still the priority. There are few cultivators who practice flying swords, so no one will invest more in the whereabouts of these two people. Enlightened Master Brightsword's orthodoxy was in the Changbai sect. Li Xiaobai's orthodoxy was also in the Flame Bamboo Sword sect. What he needed to find was Reverend Brightsword's longsword and Li Xiaobai's 9 stars transit. However, since the two of them had already perished together, their flying swords might not be intact. Even if they were found, it would be useless for sword transformation swordsmen and nascent soul cultivators. "I understand." Xiaohua nodded and said, "For seniors are looking for these 10 flying swords, as well as the remains of the 2 seniors and their storage bags. Yes, for us golden core cultivators, these things are the most attractive." Zhu Qinghe did not hide it and nodded. "If we can obtain their legacy, it will be extremely useful for us to break through to the nascent soul realm. It might even be our only chance." Then, Zhu Chenghe glanced at Chang Yefeng and said, although the various sects have their own guesses and have their own opinions about the place of their duel, they have overlooked one point. This is also something that I suddenly realized when I saw that place. What point? Chang Yefeng asked. That's right. Fellow Taoist Jew, what point is it? Xie Zhiqian was also eager to know. After all, he also did not understand how Zhu Chenghe could know about such a secret place. Hee, I'll keep you in suspense for now. Zhu Chenghe laughed and said, when you see it, you will naturally understand. At that time, I didn't think too much about it until I saw the strange scene there. However, it was also because of this that I felt that I didn't have much confidence in breaking in, so I retreated to find the three of you to help me. Then, he glanced at Xiao Hua and said, I didn't see the heavenly ingrass, but according to my guess and the sex records, it should be there in that environment. Yes, I hope Senior's guess is correct. At this time, Xiao Hua's heart was far less bitter than before. Since he knew that Zhu Chenghe and the others were looking for 10 flying swords, and that it was related to sword cultivation, Xiao Hua was already eager to try. Even if there was no heavenly ingrass, this trip might still have a harvest. The heavenly ingrass's nature is neutral. Its nature is neutral and yin and yang. Chen Yi was very familiar with spiritual herbs and whispered, who, at this time, a divine sense swept over from afar, sweeping past everyone and immediately locking them. Zhu Chenghe was extremely embarrassed and angry, and with a light rebuke, his divine sense also rushed out. Fellow Taoist, help me. A slightly old voice transmitted from where the divine sense swept over, and the tone was very anxious. This is bad. Zhu Chenghe's divine sense swept over and immediately knew the origin of the matter. His face was slightly shocked, and he whispered, this is that shameless cultivator. He couldn't get rid of Mo Zhao himself, so he actually led him to us. Quickly get out. Don't let that guy find out about the secret passage here. Chun Yi's divine sense was not inferior to Zhu Chenghe's, and she immediately urged. Xiao Hua and the others didn't dare to be negligent, and they quickly followed Zhu Chenghe out of the secret passage. Just as they escaped the range of the secret passage, Xiao Hua felt a kind of pressure on his body, forcing him to land on the ground. Moreover, a thick black thing rushed towards his body like a swarm of bees, and the Yu Sha could only block a small part of it. Looking at Chen Yi and the others again, their bodies were flashing with light, as if the light around them was blocking the black thing around them, and they were still flying about 10 feet away. Xiao Hua, can you fly? Xie Zhiqian asked. This is really strange. This is only the edge of the Ink Zhao Black Forest. How did Mo Zhao fly out from the middle to the outside? Junior can fly, but it consumes a lot of magic power. Xiao Hua said with a wry smile. Junior had better try his best to fly below, and I hope to get rid of this trouble as soon as possible. Let's go. We'll go and meet him. Zhu Chenghe waved his hand and said, yes. Chang Yefeng and the others responded, and they all flew up. Xiao Hua didn't dare to release his Buddhist consciousness, and his divine sense was obviously limited in the Ink Zhao Black Forest, so he naturally had to hide his strength. After flying for a few miles, Zhu Chenghe waved his hand, and Chen Yi and the others hid on a tall black tree, while Xiao Hua half flew and half crawled on a black tree. Roar. A roar that sounded like a dragon's roar and a wolf's howl could be heard from a few miles away. The voice of the cultivator who was running for his life could also be heard. My fellow cultivators, there are 2 Mo Zhao behind me. I only came here because I had no other choice. If you help me kill these 2 Mo Zhao, I won't take anything from you. In fact, I would like to thank you for your help. Humph. Zhu Chenghe snorted and didn't answer. In less than half a cup of tea's time, waves of black waves rose up in front of them, and the black thing unique to the Ink Zhao Black Forest was thrown into the air as if it was swept up by a hurricane. The Black Forest, which looked calm just a moment ago, was now swaying from side to side, as if it was split by a huge wave. Xiao Hua could even hear the sound of trees falling to the ground in the distance. Hiss. When a cultivator in a light green robe flew over, Xiao Hua saw the Mo Zhao that was chasing the cultivator, and he couldn't help but gasp. The Mo Zhao was as black as its name. Its whole body was pitch black, and it was even darker than the black trees around it. Moreover, there was a kind of glossy gloss in the darkness, and it was obvious that the skin of the Emojiao was extremely hard. Moreover, the Emojiao was 30 feet long and 3 feet thick. Its body was like a black snake, but it was different from a black snake. The front part of the Emojiao's head had an additional membrane, and there were bony forks protruding from the membrane. At this time, it was swaying back and forth, as if it was angry. The other parts of the Emojiao's head were similar to a snake's head, but its fangs were protruding out, and its fist-sized eyes were flashing with red light. Looking at the tail of the Emojiao, it was indeed similar to a python's. It was slightly thick, and it was in the shape of a fish's fin. What surprised Xiaohua the most was that there was a pair of 1-foot-long wings in the middle of the Emojiao's body. At this time, it was flapping up and down, and a strong wind was stirring up above the pitch-black membrane. It was somewhat similar to the wings of a thunder beast. Roar! The Emojiao in front roared angrily, and its tail swayed violently, hitting the black trees around it. The extremely hard black trees were like firewood in the face of the Emojiao's tail, and they were easily overturned. The Emojiao flew into the air, and with the flap of its wings, it flew far away. Tisk! Xiaohua was very impressed. He thought to himself, this Emojiao is indeed a natural spiritual creature. Emojiao Black Forest, Emojiao Black Forest, this is the nest of the Emojiao. I don't know what kind of amazing magical powers it has. Just as Xiaohua thought to himself, Emojiao, who was tailing them, also roared and raised his head high. Then, he suddenly stretched his head forward and spat out a swirling mass of black gas, which shot straight at the cultivator who was fleeing in front of him. Oh my, it's so powerful. Xiaohua's divine thoughts swept through the area, and he could see clearly that the pitch-black mass of air was not only condensed by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, but more importantly, the special black thing in the Emojiao Black Forest had filled the entire mass of air. Moreover, balls of different sizes were condensed in the mass of air, colliding and rotating with each other. Xiaohua's divine thoughts seemed to be attracted by the black thing in the mass of air. -8. Chapter 1995. When the cultivator who was being chased saw Emojiao spit out a strange mass of black gas, his expression changed drastically. He hurriedly waved his hand, and a magic treasure that looked like a lotus flew out of his hand. It turned into a tricolored arc that protected his back. However, as soon as the magic treasure left his hand, the black things in the surroundings swarmed toward it as if they were attracted to it. In just a moment, the tricolored arc absorbed a lot of the black things, and its brilliance became somewhat dim. Emojiao's mass of black gas was like a fish swimming in the dark forest, and it quickly dived into the tricolored arc. With a loud bang, the tricolored arc collided with the mass of black gas, and a huge force stretched the arc extremely long. With another bang, the mass of black gas broke through the arc and smashed into the cultivator's back like a meteor. My fellow cultivator, help me. When the cultivator saw that his magic treasure was easily destroyed, he panicked. However, it was obvious that this was not the first time it had been destroyed. Therefore, he turned his body nimbly and pounced on Zhu Chenghe, who was standing on his left. The mass of black gas was originally going to pounce on the cultivator, but because of the sudden change in the cultivator's body, it could not completely catch up with him. Instead, it made a slight turn and smashed into Zhu Chenghe. Damn it! Zhu Chenghe did not expect the cultivator to be so insidious. He did not even wait for the cultivator's name to be introduced, and he did not even give any warning. The cultivator brought the disaster to him, and he could not help but feel angry. However, when the mass of black gas was about to hit him, he could not care less. He shook his Taoist robe and raised his right hand from it. At this time, Zhu Chenghe's right hand had a faint golden color, which was particularly obvious in the dark forest. This faint golden color repelled the black things outside, and it could not be absorbed. Kill! Zhu Chenghe shouted in a low voice and swung his right arm straight down. A golden brilliance appeared from his hand like a sword, and it slashed directly at the mass of black gas that was coming toward him. A buzzing sound was heard as the sword light struck the black gas. It sounded like the buzzing of a hornet. The golden brilliance circulated at an extremely fast speed. It was as if the sword light was cutting the black gas with a saw. At the same time, the force of the mass of black gas bent the sword light. Zhu Chenghe's Taoist robe and hair were blown backward. His right arm trembled slightly, and his whole body was moving back inch by inch. Villahedchen, help me. Zhu Chenghe's Dharma power was rapidly depleted. When he saw the other Emo Zhao in the distance raised her head high again, he knew that things were not going well, and he immediately shouted, "Fellow cultivator Zhu, wait a moment." When Chunyi heard Zhu Chenghe's cry for help, she waved her hand. After a ray of light flashed, a string of floating flower petals flashed in the air and fell on the mass of air like a fairy scattering flowers. When the petals touched the mass of black gas, all the petals turned into rotating flying swords, stabbing into the mass of black gas from all directions. Boom, boom, boom. There was another burst of noise. After the roaring noise subsided, there was a soft poof sound. First, it came from Zhu Chenghe's sword light. Then, the air mass seemed to be pierced everywhere. Pa-pa-pa-pa sounds were incessant. At the same time, the black things that had condensed into black clumps once again flew out in all directions. Not only did they attack Zhu Chenghe and Chen Yi, but they also attacked the cultivator who had lured the source of the trouble to the side. Go! Zhu Chenghe and others roared, and the flying swords in their hands were waved again. The flying swords turned into stars and stabbed on the black balls. These black balls were much easier to deal with than the mass of black gas. After the sword light passed, they turned into black fog and scattered in the air of the black forest. Zhu Chenghe scanned the fleeing cultivator with his divine sense. The cultivator didn't even look back. With a wave of his sleeve, a faint green brilliance spread out. A wooden stick flashed and scattered the black balls. His figure continued to fly behind Zhu Chenghe and the others, as if he didn't care about the situation Zhu Chenghe and the others were in. Zhu Chenghe was furious. He had thought of this long ago, but he was afraid that the secret path would be exposed, so he had no choice but to come out and help. At this time, he was with Chunyi and others. They were too big of a target, and they could not be compared with the fleeing cultivator. They would definitely be chased by Emo Zhao. Villa Master Chun, fellow cultivator Chong, fellow cultivator Xia. Zhu Chenghe did not think too much and said, "Since we have met Emo Zhao, it is a chance. We are confident that we can defeat him." Well said. Chun-Yi squinted her eyes when she saw Emo Zhao. She knew that Emo Zhao was full of treasures. Usually, Emo Zhao would hide in the depths of the Black Forest, and she would not dare to enter. How could she not be happy when Emo Zhao delivered himself to her? "I will team up with fellow cultivator Chong." Chun-Yi shouted and flew forward. She waved her hands, and clusters of flowers flew out. The flowers were rainbows formed by the sword light. Okay. Chang Yefeng, who was not far away from Chen Yi, was already on guard. When he heard Chun Yi's words, he did not say anything. He coordinated with Chen Yi's angle, and the huge sword in his hand, which was more than 10 feet long and half a foot wide, slashed through the air. It was like a door plank and slashed toward Emo Zhao, who was closest to them. "I am coming too," Xie Zhiqian shouted and flew up with Zhu Chenghe. A flying sword flew out from his hand like a meteor and pierced the right eye of the other Emo Zhao. Roar! The two Emo Zhao were angry. The Emo Zhao that had been accumulating power flapped its wings and opened its mouth to spit out a cloud of black gas toward Chen Yi. The other Emo Zhao opened its mouth and spat out 2 clouds of black venom, which turned into sharp arrows toward the flying sword that was coming toward them. "Don't take it head-on," Zhu Chenghe quickly reminded Xie Zhiqian when he saw that the flying sword was close to the venom. "Fellow cultivator Zhu, please know that I's flying sword has—" Xie Zhiqian did not take it seriously. He smiled and was about to explain when he heard a sizzling sound. Xie Zhiqian was shocked when he saw that the Emo Zhao's venom had eroded the brilliance around the flying sword. The brilliance of the flying sword had become much dimmer. "Keep." Xie Zhiqian did not dare to be careless. He recited the sword formula and retrieved the flying sword. He scanned it with his divine thought and saw that the 3-inch-long flying sword was covered with black spots. It looked like a rusty iron sword. "Fellow cultivator Xie, The Mo Zhao's venom is mixed with the black sand in the black forest. It is extraordinary. Zhu Chenghe smiled bitterly. It is the nemesis of my flying sword. If it were not for the fact that the Mo Zhao could not spit out too much venom, we would have to run away. As Zhu Chenghe spoke, 2 clouds of brilliance flew out from his hand and blocked in front of him and Xie Zhiqian. The brilliance was slowly annihilated by the Mo Zhao's venom. However, due to the brilliance, the venom was completely consumed. Quick! Mo Zhao seems to be trying to escape. Zhu Chenghe was about to talk to Xie Zhiqian when he scanned the area with his divine thought. As expected, Mo Zhao, who had spat out the venom earlier, saw that both the venom and the air mass were ineffective. Moreover, there were 4 powerful cultivators in front of him. He quickly flapped his wings and turned his body nimbly as if he was about to fly away. -8. Chapter 1996. Zhu Chenghe had noticed it, and Chunyi was even more aware of it. Her flying swords had already landed on Mo Zhao's body. The flying swords created a series of sparks on Mo Zhao's black body, but they could not hurt Mo Zhao at all. Go! Chun-Yi could not allow the fatty meat in her mouth to escape. She rubbed her hands, and more peanuts flew out. Moreover, Chun-Yi opened her mouth and spat out a cloud of pink mist. It suddenly expanded in the air and turned into a light veil. It covered Mo Zhao from top to bottom. Mo Zhao flapped his wings and flew away. However, as soon as he cast out the light muslin, a strong restrictive force was generated and firmly restrained them. It was as if a huge hand had grabbed them. Roar! Mo Zhao was furious. He tried his best to twist his body. His 2 fin-like tails were suddenly lifted up and drew 2 black shadows in the air. He almost swept the black wood that Xiaohua was climbing and hit the light veil's magical weapon from the side. Puff, puff. 2 soft sounds rang out as the 2 hammers smashed into the veil. The light on the veil immediately dimmed, and Chen Yi's face flushed red. Don't worry, Villa Master Chan. I will help you. Zhu Chenghe smiled bitterly in his heart. Chun-Yi was too greedy. Not only did she not wait for him to take out his Dharma treasure, but she also wanted to trap the 2 Mo Zhao. That was why she was hit by the powerful force of the Mo Zhao. However, the moment Zhu Chenghe activated the 3 Dharma treasures in his storage bag, Mo Zhao did not fly away. Instead, he dived into the ground and disappeared into the dark ground in a flash of light as he dived into the ground. Earth escape? Xiaohua was stunned. Go after him. Chun-Yi waved her hand, and the pink veil fell into her hand. She shouted softly, and the colorful light around her body flashed. It seemed that she was going to chase after Mo Zhao. Villa Master Chan. Zhu Chenghe whispered. The 5 elements escape skill is useless in Mo Zhao Black Forest. Alas, Chun-Yi suddenly came to an understanding when she heard this, and she slapped herself on the forehead and laughed bitterly. I was in a hurry and forgot about this matter. Immediately after, the 5-colored brilliance around Chun-Yi gradually disappeared, revealing Chen-Yi's embarrassed and angry expression. Ahem. Zhu Chenghe coughed and said, even if Villa Master Chun knows the rare 5 elements escape skill, I'm afraid that he is no match for Mo Zhao, who was born with the earth escape skill. We are not fated to fight Mo Zhao today. Hee, Manor Lord Chen, you don't have to regret it. Chang Yefeng held the giant sword in his hand and said with a smile, Mo Zhao is rarely captured in the Black Forest because it can escape. Unless you use the talisman that condenses the ground into toughness at the very beginning. Who would have prepared for Mo Zhao's sudden appearance? Xie Zhiqian smiled bitterly. At this point, everyone thought of the cultivator who lured Mo Zhao here, and looked in the direction that the cultivator had fled. Unfortunately, other than the pitch-black sky and the branches of the black tree, where were the figures of cultivators? AI, let's go. Zhu Chenghe raised his head to look at Xiaohua and said, just treat it as being a good person this time. Humph. If I see this cultivator next time, I will definitely kill him without saying anything. Chun-Yi said angrily. However, before she could finish her words, a familiar voice came from afar. Fellow cultivator, help me, ah? Xiaohua was stunned. Wasn't that the cultivator who had escaped just now? This guy dares to come back? Xiaohua was extremely surprised. He had never thought that there would be such a shameless cultivator in the world. However, before Xiaohua could speak or look at the expressions of Qian Yi and the others, Zhu Chenghe's countenance instantly went ghastly pale. He slapped his hand and withdrew 4 jade slips from his storage pouch, and his divine sense swiftly wrote something on them. After that, he waved his hand and the jade slips flew towards Qian Yi and the others, and he cried out, "Fellow Taoists, this is the place we're heading to. If any fellow Taoist escapes this calamity, then you can meet up here. Everyone, please take care of yourselves." After that, Zhu Chenghe took the lead and flew toward the place where Imo Zhao had disappeared. Zhu Chenghe was very fast, but Chunyi and Chang Yefeng were not slow either. The two of them also scanned the distance with their divine senses, and an incredulous expression appeared on their faces. Before Zhu Chenghe could throw the jade slip to them, they had already flown into the air, grabbed the jade slip with their hands, and put it into their storage bags without even looking at it. Then, they turned into streaks of light, disregarding the dangers of ink shadow black forest, and left. Xiaohua took the jade slips and immediately released his Buddhist thought. However, before his Buddhist thought could reach far, a suffocating feeling came from afar. It was like the momentum of 10,000 horses galloping in the air. Ah? Xiaohua trembled. He knew that there must be a change in the Imo Zhao Black Forest. When he released his Buddhist thought for more than 10 miles, he saw that there seemed to be a huge wave in the Black Forest. The black sand was lifted high. Was it more than 10 feet high? Moreover, under the waves of the black sand, many spirit beasts and even spirit birds, and some cultivators were fleeing in panic. While Xiaohua was watching, 2 cultivators in the late stage of foundation establishment were swallowed by the black sand in the blink of an eye because their flying speed was not fast enough. Moreover, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth in the waves of the black sand was extremely chaotic. Xiaohua's Buddhist thought could not penetrate it, so he could not see whether the cultivators were dead or alive. The black sand moved very fast, as if following the flow of the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. It rushed several miles in an instant. At this time, the panicked Xie Zhiqian released his divine thought and found the abnormality. Imo Zhao, why did I encounter something that would not happen in tens of thousands of years? After saying that, he did not even greet Xiaohua. His figure followed Chen Yi and the others and chased after them. Xiaohua did not dare to be negligent. His figure also swept up, but he still flew very low, following behind Xie Zhiqian. He flew while observing Imo Zhao. The ink storm was like an ocean wave, surging forward violently. Wherever it went, everything in the Black Forest would be engulfed. Moreover, the ink storm was like a hurricane, stirring up all the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. All the withered branches and leaves in the Black Forest were swept up high into the sky. Xiaohua observed for a moment and had a plan in his heart. Although Imo Zhao was powerful, his speed was still slower than his bright thunder escape. If he used all his strength, escaping would not be a problem. However, Chen Yi and the others were in front of him. If he ran too fast, it was inevitable that he would be discovered. Therefore, Xiaohua thought for a moment, and his direction was slightly slanted, flying in another direction. Damn it, the world is really strange. A small foundation establishment cultivator actually ran to the inner layer of the Black Forest. Are you not afraid of being eaten by Imo Zhao? A voice sounded from above Xiaohua's head. Needless to say, it was the cultivator who lured Imo Zhao here. Xiaohua did not pay much attention to him. He only turned his head slightly and saw that it was a short and fat gold core cultivator. His face was shriveled and flat, like a rotten persimmon. Moreover, his eyes were extremely small and were embedded in the persimmon, as if they could not be seen. Give me your storage pouch, I will give you a ride. The cultivator looked at Xiaohua and sneered, with your flying speed, you will be swallowed by Imo Zhao sooner or later. Not only will your true origin be eroded, your storage pouch will also be destroyed. I will show you kindness and give you a ride. If you are fated to escape, it is better than your cultivation being crippled and becoming an ordinary person. Instead of letting others benefit from this storage pouch, why not let me benefit from it? Hee hee. Xiaohua roughly understood and sneered. that is my business. It has nothing to do with you. Even if I throw my storage pouch here and let other cultivators benefit, I will not give it to a scoundrel who wants to take advantage of the situation." When the cultivator heard this, not only was he not angry, but he laughed instead. "Rotten wood can't be carved. You don't understand shit. Didn't I just lead Imo Zhao to your teacher's place? Think with your ass. If your teacher did not fight with Imo Zhao, you would have encountered Imo Zhao long ago, wouldn't you? Didn't you die in Imo Zhao long ago? How can you still talk to me here?" Seeing such a shameless cultivator, Xiaohua sighed inwardly and ignored him. His body tilted and flew in another direction. Why are you flying there? You can only escape by flying straight," the short and fat cultivator said curiously. Then, he swept back with his divine thought and rolled his bean-sized eyes. He rubbed his hands and threw a spell at Xiaohua. At the same time, his other hand grabbed at the void, trying to scare away the storage pouch in Xiaohua's eyes. "You really don't want to live anymore." Xiaohua was not as panicked as the short and fat cultivator imagined, nor was he flying around absent-mindedly. His Buddhist sense saw that the cultivator was actually trying to kill him behind his back without a trace of the demeanor of a senior, and he could not help but be furious. His body suddenly stopped in midair, and he waved his hand, using the earth condensation technique. Immediately, an oppressive force swarmed from all around the cultivator, squeezing the cultivator tightly. "Oh, young man, your temper is not small." The cultivator was not afraid of Xiaohua's spell at all, and only urged the magic power in his hand. He believed that Xiaohua's magic power was definitely not as deep as his, and definitely not as fast as his spell. However, the instant the cultivator's great confinement art smashed onto Xiaohua, a burst of brilliant light flickered all over Xiaohua's body. It was precisely the activation of the protective brilliance. Moreover, just outside the brilliance, a layer of earth-yellow armor suddenly formed. Furthermore, Xiaohua's figure suddenly shot up, as fast as a messaging talisman. The great confinement technique only smashed into Xiaohua's lower body, clearly hitting nothing but air. Protective brilliance? The cultivator was stunned, and a bad feeling emerged in his heart. He hurriedly shook his two arms outwards, as if he also wanted to urge the protective brilliance to break free from Xiaohua's earth condensation technique. Unexpectedly, at this moment, the cultivator suddenly felt a sharp pain in his mind, as if an awl had pierced into his brain. His divine thought involuntarily contracted, and the magic power in his body also went out of control at the same time. Therefore, the cultivator could not help but cry out, "Oh!" His two hands tried to support his head. -8. Chapter 1997. Heh. Xiaohua sneered. The earth condensation technique had already hit the cultivator. The surrounding earth attribute heaven and earth spiritual qi swarmed over, binding the cultivator tightly. Xiaohua's figure swept towards the cultivator again. He reached out and pulled down two huge storage bags from the waist of the cultivator, who fell from the air. He turned around and was about to escape. At this moment, Xiaohua's gaze swept over and saw a green silk ribbon on the cultivator's neck. At this moment, the cultivator was panicking. The protective brilliance around his body flickered as soon as it was suppressed. Xiaohua's heart stirred. He reached out and pulled out the green silk ribbon. On the green silk ribbon, there was a doll-like doll tied to it. That doll was only the size of a thumb. Its entire body was faintly green. A layer of faintly discernible green seal text appeared from time to time. It seemed to be floating on the outer layer, but also seemed to be hidden inside the doll. Looking at the doll again, its features were clear. Its eyes were tightly closed, and there was a trace of sadness at the corner of its mouth. It seemed to be full of sorrow. Sorcerer puppet? Xiaohua was stunned. His eyes almost shrank. He almost didn't dare to believe his eyes. However, even if he saw the green seal text, he still didn't dare to believe it. After all, sorcerer puppets were legendary ancient objects. He had only seen them in Huang Yi's imprint. He couldn't be sure. Therefore, Xiaohua didn't even think and hid the doll in his arms. He didn't even look at the cultivator who fell on the ground. He turned around and fled. The eyes of the cultivator who fell on the ground were filled with regret, not only for provoking Xiaohua, but also for his carelessness. He panicked because of his escape. In fact, his cultivation wasn't weaker than Xiaohua's. It was only because of his carelessness that he felt that dealing with a baby like Xiaohua didn't require much effort. But he really didn't expect Xiaohua to have soul stab and earth condensation technique. He didn't care about dealing with Xiaohua, but Xiaohua was serious. He used a secret technique right from the start. Who was stronger and who was weaker? Naturally, it was clear. However, the cultivator simply didn't have much time to regret, nor did he have much time to break through Xiaohua's earth condensation technique. The ink storm came charging over like it was covering the sky and covering the earth. Countless ink sand hit the cultivator's meridians like it was real, hitting the true essence within the meridians and the golden core that was the source of the true essence within the dantian. The golden core was originally a faint yellow color, and it revolved in his dantian. However, when a large amount of ink entered the golden core, the outer layer of the golden core was instantly dyed black. Soon after, a layer of fine black powder appeared on the surface of the golden core. When the black powder came into contact with the spirit chi, it immediately formed bubbles. The bubbles quickly burst, layer after layer. As the bubbles burst, the golden core shrank slightly. The cultivator was still struggling with all his might, but after being annihilated by the ink storm, his breath and surroundings were completely filled with the tyrannical ink sand. He was unable to extract the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, and could only use his Jindan to activate his mana. But at this moment, his Jindan had also been invaded by the ink sand. Not to mention that the vital essence in his meridians had been completely blocked by the ink sand. Unable to activate his mana, even if his meridians were intact, his Jindan would not be able to provide vital essence. As a result, the cultivator's face was deathly pale, and he no longer wanted to struggle. However, at this moment, the cultivator's body loosened. Xiaohua's earth condensation technique was still unable to resist the might of the ink storm, and it collapsed under the might of heaven and earth. The cultivator suddenly rejoiced, and a trace of hope rose in his heart. However, before he could crawl up from the ground, a wind howled, and a piece of black wood as thick as a duck's egg flew through the hurricane, striking the cultivator's temple. The cultivator faintly glanced to the side, not panicking in the slightest. He waved his left hand, and an extremely simple object controlling technique was used, wanting to knock the black wood away. However, he extended his hand, but his mana was gone. His technique was nothing more than a superficial struggle. With a bang, that black wood struck the cultivator's temple, and a wisp of dark red blood flowed down from the cultivator's forehead. The cultivator's body swayed twice, and he fell to the ground, never to crawl up again. A golden core cultivator was killed by a black wood just like that. Xiaohua took the other party's doll and threw the two huge storage bags into the space. His figure no longer hesitated, and he flew forward slightly crookedly. However, after flying for half a cup of tea's time, Xiaohua felt that something was wrong. The amount of ink sand in the air was increasing, and with the agitation of the heaven and earth spiritual chi, the ink sand seemed to be affected. Moreover, as Xiaohua flew, the surrounding black wood became thicker, and from time to time, there were some black vines baring their fangs and brandishing their claws from the black wood, as if to block Xiaohua. This is bad. Xiaohua suddenly realized that he was flying in the wrong direction again. The place where Channy flew to should be outside of the ink cloud black forest, and in order to avoid their eyes and ears, he diverted. Wasn't he flying to the middle of the ink cloud black forest? However, seeing that the ink cloud black forest was becoming more and more violent, and had the power to sweep everything away, Xiaohua wanted to fly in front of the ink cloud black forest again. My goodness, what should I do now? Xiaohua's heart trembled slightly. On one hand, he was desperately trying to escape into the depths of the ink cloud black forest, and on the other hand, his mind was spinning like a windmill, trying to find a way to escape. However, after thinking for a long time, Xiaohua still could not think of a way to escape from the ink cloud black forest, even though Mo Bao's momentum and speed were increasing exponentially. Damn it! Am I going to be buried in the ink cloud black forest? Xiao Hua sighed in his heart, but at this moment, a ray of light flashed in his heart. Ink cloud. That's right. Where did the ink cloud black forest go? I have been in the ink cloud black forest for a long time, but why haven't I seen a single ink cloud black forest? If there is no ink cloud black forest, will it still be a dangerous place? Xiao Hua came to his senses and lowered his head to look at the pitch-black ground. Ha ha ha, they are all underground. Xiao Hua's divine sense could not reach far, so when he used his Buddhist awareness to check, he really saw that under the pitch-black ground, there were many ink cloud black forests that were like hibernating snakes. They curled up into a coil and wrapped themselves with their fleshy wings. Well, the ground can block divine sense, so it should be able to block most of the ink cloud black forest. Since the ink cloud black forest has spread its fleshy wings, the fleshy wings should be able to block a part of the ink cloud black forest. As for the remaining ink cloud black forest, the ink cloud black forest should not be afraid of it. Xiao Hua understood and his heart immediately calmed down. He formed a seal with his hands and used the earth escape technique. His body escaped into the pitch-black ground. However, in just a moment, Xiao Hua flew out from the ground again and said with a smile, "I am stupid. The ink cloud black forest is extremely dangerous. Even a gold core stage cultivator has to be careful in fear of being attacked by the ink cloud black forest or other ferocious creatures. Now, because of the ink cloud black forest, all the ferocious creatures have escaped. Before the ink cloud black forest, who would dare not to escape? Isn't this a good time for me to go deep into the ink cloud black forest? If we don't go in now, what are we waiting for?" -8. Chapter 1998. Immediately, Xiao Hua took out the maze again and put it on his body. His body stuck close to the ground and flew towards the depths of the black forest. Of course, Xiao Hua was also prepared. The 100 talismans in the rabbit array were already in his hand. He was only waiting for the time when he couldn't escape. Then he would go deep into the ground and lay out the array. Xiao Hua's bright thunder escape was indeed powerful. He quickly rushed in front of Mo Bao like a warrior surfing the waves, standing on top of the waves. Those hiding under the ground were not only Mo Zhao and other monsters, but also Gold Core Stage and Nascent Soul Stage cultivators. These cultivators left their spirit sense outside to observe Mo Bao's whereabouts. At this time, they actually saw Xiao Hua's figure that was like a meteor. They couldn't help but be shocked. None of them didn't want to see Xiao Hua's true face. Unfortunately, their spirit sense didn't dare to be too far away. Moreover, Xiao Hua's maze also blocked their spirit sense. Even if they wanted to see, they couldn't. Which expert is this? He actually dares to fly like this in the Mo Zhao Black Forest? And his flying speed is so fast? The cultivators started to guess. Some were spirit-severing stage cultivators, some were nascent soul stage cultivators, and some even guessed that it was the Imperial Thunder Sect. However, they never thought that under the maze, it was just a small Imperial Thunder Sect and a small Foundation Establishment stage cultivator in the myriad Thunder Valley. Buzz, buzz, it seemed to be the sound of mountains shaking and the earth quaking, coming from the front of Xiao Hua's head. Xiao Hua tried his best to probe out with his Buddhist consciousness, but he could not find any clues. However, Xiao Hua understood in his heart that the ink cloud black forest must have produced an ink storm in the depths of the forest and was pushing out in all directions. Therefore, he didn't dare to delay any longer. He formed a seal and drilled into the ground. Moreover, he used all his spirit sense to go as deep as possible. After passing by dozens of Mo Zhao of different sizes, Xiao Hua finally felt a huge force starting to support him. He knew that he had almost reached the deepest part of the earth escape, so he didn't waste any more spirit sense to go down. Instead, he hurriedly threw out the 100 talismans to lay out the rabbit array. Just after Xiao Hua threw out most of the talismans, a feeling of black clouds pressing down on the city rushed over from above. Good. It's still so powerful even though it's so far from the ground. Xiao Hua was flabbergasted. He activated the magic power in his hand and waved it continuously. Finally, as the ink sand fell one after another, he grabbed his hand. The rabbit spell formation was activated one after another and blocked the oppressive aura. However, the formation was only able to block the majority of the ink sand. There was still an extremely small amount of ink sand that was able to penetrate through the gaps in the formation. It was sucked onto Xiao Hua's body. However, at this moment, the ink sand was not much worse than the ink sand that Xiao Hua had encountered at the edge of the ink cloud black forest. After entering his meridians, it was absorbed by the Yao milk. Although Xiao Hua did not release his Buddhist consciousness from the magic circle, he could see the flickering brilliance above the magic circle. It seemed like a lonely lamp in the waves that wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Naturally, he also knew the brutality of the ink violence on the ground. Thus, he sighed and clapped his hand, taking out the doll that looked like a wizard puppet. Although it looks the same as the sorcerer puppet, I can't be sure. Xiao Hua stared at the doll and thought to himself, but this doll is obviously written in green seal script. It must be related to witchcraft. However, that cultivator is only at the peak of the early stage of the Golden Core realm. He has not reached the middle stage of the Golden Core realm. Where did he get the sorcerer puppet? Unfortunately, that cultivator was submerged by the ink violence. Now, I don't know whether he is dead or alive. Humph, such a shameless cultivator. He won't even let go of a small foundation establishment cultivator like me. What's the use of keeping him alive in this world? Xiao Hua immediately curled his lips and placed the sorcerer puppet aside. Then, he took out the 2 storage pouches that he had taken from that cultivator from the space. When he opened the storage pouches to take a look, he could not help but be stunned. There were a lot of things in the bag of holding, but there were no spirit stones, no medicinal pills, and no spirit herbs. There were only a lot of broken jade slips, some worn-out magic tools, magic treasures, and some inexplicable things. I understand. Xiao Hua slapped his forehead and said with a smile, "This guy is the same as the cultivator abandoned by the heavens." He came to the ink cloud black forest to look for cultivation techniques or magic treasure remains. It's just that this guy is really amazing. He actually collected so many things. Presumably, that sorcerer puppet was also found by him in the ink cloud black forest. Since that cultivator said that all storage pouches cannot escape the ink violence, then the ink sand must be able to corrode storage pouches. These things cannot be left in storage pouches. They must be exposed in the ink cloud black forest. Moreover, the ink sand will attack at any time. It is impossible for all magic tools and magic treasures to be intact. However, this cultivator is self-taught. He hid the sorcerer puppet close to his body. Xiao Hua glanced at the doll again and said with a smile, "It's just a pity that he doesn't know the method to refine the sorcerer puppet. It is useless for him to keep it. On the contrary, it is giving this young master a life." Xiao Hua had seen the introduction and method to refine the sorcerer puppet from Huang Yi's ghost cultivation inheritance. He knew that this sorcerer puppet was an object refined by ancient witchcraft. It was incomparably miraculous. After refining it, it could be kept close to the body and could die once in place of the cultivator. As for why it was like this and how it was refined, in this day and age where witchcraft had long been lost, who would know? Even ghost cultivators with hundreds of thousands or millions of years of inheritance did not know. 2 white bones? Xiao Hua scanned the area with his divine sense, and he saw 2 extremely long and thick white bones among the pile of junk. Xiao Hua clapped his hands and took out the white bones from his storage pouch. He held them in his hands and observed them carefully. The white bones were extremely thick. Xiao Hua's 2 hands could not close together. Moreover, the white bones were extremely long. Xiao Hua was already tall and thin, but the white bones were actually more than twice as tall as him. Good heavens, these 2 white bones are actually compatible with the giant head in the space. Xiao Hua's heart stirred. The true samadhi fire in his hands was ignited and burned the 2 white bones. As Xiao Hua expected, not long after, strings of tadpole-like green seal characters emerged from the white bones. They floated in the air for a moment and then flew into the space with Xiao Hua's mind. They slowly revolved around reverse light. Thus, pieces of green seal characters and pictures were reflected in Xiao Hua's mind. After the time of 2 meals, the green seal characters gradually dimmed and disappeared. Everything was stored in Xiao Hua's mind. Alas, Even with the ghost cultivator's inheritance, this young master still does not understand these green seal characters. Xiao Hua sighed. Moreover, according to the ghost cultivator's inheritance, this talisman curse technique came from the immemorial witchcraft. It's just that it's much more shallow. I wonder when this young master will be able to understand these green seal characters. Thinking of the green seal characters, Xiao Hua remembered the Confucian words on the tortoise shell. Those were the inscriptions on the armor, which also originated from the immemorial era. However, they were used by Confucian cultivators to record cultivation techniques. Looking at the vivid green seal characters, Xiao Hua sighed again. He swept his mind again, and the two white bones flew into the space. Sure enough, once the white bones entered the space, ka-cha-cha sounds of thunder could be heard. The white bones automatically flew to the bottom of the previous white bones and lay down. They looked just like the calf bones of a giant. This young master understands now. Seeing the invisible connection between the white bones and the green lightning wrapped around the white bones, Xiao Hua smiled. This is the skeleton of an immemorial celestial. It's even related to lightning. If we can gather the skeleton of this celestial, maybe something fun will happen. As for what would be fun, Xiao Hua scratched his head and couldn't think of anything. Below the white bones, the lightning beast cub seemed to still be in a deep slumber. The lightning ball on the white bones also wrapped around it. Moreover, from time to time, lightning would be born from the white clouds in the air, striking the lightning beast cub. No matter what, this little cub can live. Xiao Hua smiled and looked at the poisoned beauty retaining grass. In this space, the beast poison seemed to have stopped, and the beauty retaining grass had a strong vitality. Although Xiao Hua didn't expel the poison from the beauty retaining grass, the originally dead beauty retaining grass regained its vitality at this time. Moreover, it was fighting against the beast poison step by step. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't have time now, Xiao Hua wouldn't dare to take the beauty retaining grass out of the space. He was afraid that the beast poison would wreak havoc again. If he didn't have the confidence to expel the poison, Xiao Hua would definitely take the beauty retaining grass out of the space and see if he could use a secret method to save the beauty retaining grass. Thinking about it, which female cultivator wouldn't like a spiritual grass that could make a person stay young forever? Thinking about it again, even the burial flower manor only had 4 stalks. If he planted them in the space, then the spirit stones, TSK, it wouldn't be any worse than a jade mine. Thinking about it, Xiao Hua unconsciously licked his dry lips. It's better not to think too much. Xiao Hua hurriedly pulled his consciousness out of the space and flipped through the ghost cultivator's inheritance. He carefully looked at the content of the shaman puppet and also looked at the details of the refining method of the shaman puppet. Oh, so this shaman puppet isn't omnipotent. The first time Xiao Hua looked at it, he didn't look at it carefully. Now that he looked at it word by word, he understood some deeper things. The power of the shaman puppet is related to the cultivation of the person refining it. It should be able to resist the attack of a cultivator who is 1 level higher than that. If there is more, the shaman puppet can't replace it. There's also the environment used, the magic tool used to kill it, and so on. The more Xiao Hua looked, the smaller the surprise in his heart. But thinking about it, if the shaman puppet had such great power, it could directly replace the death of a cultivator. If the almighty cultivator refined a few more shaman puppets, then wouldn't they be able to rest easy? Even if it was lightning tribulation, they wouldn't have to be afraid. Lightning tribulation, magic tools that aren't part of the 5 elements. They can't be replaced by shaman puppets. Xiao Hua looked and laughed. The requirements are getting more and more stringent. Oh? What are magic tools that aren't part of the 5 elements? Xiao Hua suddenly paused and looked forward. His eyes turned, and he seemed to understand something. He thought to himself, in this inheritance, it only talks about magic tools. It doesn't talk about magic treasures or spirit treasures. It's probably because in ancient times, there were only magic tools. But after it reached the Tao sect, it started to divide them into different categories and increase the number of magic tools. However, I wonder what are magic tools that are part of the 5 elements? That's right, my great wisdom heavy sword. Isn't it like this? Xiao Hua suddenly came to a realization. -8. Chapter 1999. When he thought about how he'd finally found the origin of the Great Wisdom Sword, Xiaohua couldn't help but be overjoyed. He disregarded the refining of the shaman puppet and carefully looked through the inheritance of the ghost cultivators. After an hour, Xiaohua frowned and flicked his hand, taking out the Great Wisdom Sword. The ghost cultivator's inheritance didn't say too much about magic tools that aren't part of the 5 elements. It only vaguely pointed out a few places. Xiaohua was a bit distressed. I only know that this kind of magic tool can't be refined using ordinary refining methods. It can't be contaminated with items of the 5 elements. Although the towering flame can be used to refine tools, it clearly belongs to the fire of the 5 elements. It definitely can't be used to refine the Great Wisdom Sword. The true Samadhi fire is too gentle and isn't suitable for refining tools. Could it be that I have to use that spiritual fire? But thinking about how using just a bit of spiritual fire would exhaust half of his cultivation, Xiaohua immediately became dejected. Damn it, if I want to refine the Great Wisdom Sword, I'm afraid I'll have to use 10 times, or even 100 times my current cultivation. I really don't know when I'll be able to refine it. Moreover, what kind of magic tool can I refine with the Great Wisdom Sword? Xiaohua's mind was active again. The Great Wisdom Sword was originally a sword embryo. Presumably, it will be refined into a sword. But it can't be controlled by divine sense, so how can it fly? It can only be held in the hand. If it's held in the hand, how can it be used? I don't know any sword techniques that can be held in the hand. Usually, I only use it as a staff. After all, there's still a heavenly staff technique in my memories. Thinking here, Xiaohua raised his brows again, seeming to have thought of something. He had no choice but to dig out the ghost cultivator's inheritance again. There was no other reason. The ghost cultivator's inheritance was really too much. It wasn't Xiaohua's own memories. When he used it, he could only find it on the spot. After a moment, a trace of a smile appeared on Xiaohua's face. He opened his eyes and said with a smile, 5 elements wishful heavenly staff. Isn't this the weapon you prepared for me? It turned out that in the ghost cultivator's inheritance, there was a staff-shaped magic tool used by immemorial celestials. Its size could be controlled by the heart, and it didn't belong to the 5 elements. Moreover, it was shockingly heavy. Wasn't this the staff that Xiaohua was thinking? It's a pity that the inheritance only recorded this kind of magic weapon. It didn't record how to refine it or what materials were used to refine it. Xiaohua scratched his chin with his index finger and said with a smile, presumably, with the spiritual bodies of ghosts, they are also afraid of this 5 elements wishful heaven cudgel. Even if they knew, they wouldn't dare to record it down. Forget it. A celestial being's magical artifact isn't something I've seen before. Who knows, it might even be a primordial forging technique. That's something that only almighty beings possess. I'd better not covet it. Thinking about this, Xiaohua was somewhat happy and somewhat melancholy as he put away the Great Wisdom Sword. With a wave of his hand, the Great Wisdom Sword was held in his hand. Immediately, he closed his eyes and carefully went through the method of refining the Great Wisdom Sword. Then, he used his thumb to point at the mark of the Great Wisdom Eye on his forehead and shouted, "Open!" As Xiaohua spat out the needle eye, the mark of the Great Wisdom Eye between his eyebrows gradually appeared. After waiting for a moment, Xiaohua closed his eyes and urged the soul cultivation technique. The soul strands extended out from the Great Wisdom Eye. Thread by thread, circle by circle, they wrapped around the Great Wisdom Sword according to the method of refining the Great Wisdom Sword. Following the strange winding method of the soul strands, the green seal characters on the Great Wisdom Sword began to slowly appear. One by one, they lit up, as if Xiaohua was lighting them up one after another. When all the green seal characters lit up, Xiaohua's soul strands began to fling out again. Each strand of soul strands touched a green seal character. Xiaohua only felt the place where his soul strands were connected to tremble. For some reason, there was an indescribable feeling of comfort, or perhaps it was a strange feeling. It was as if he had somewhat understood the meaning of the green seal characters, but if he were to say it out loud, it would be extremely difficult. I understand. Xiaohua was overjoyed. So this is how the green seal characters are practiced. It's definitely not the Great Wisdom Sword or the Great Wisdom Sword. The green seal characters themselves have the ability to shock the heavens and make ghosts and gods weep. So that's how it is. While thinking, Xiaohua carefully pulled out his soul strands again. One by one, he touched all the green seal characters. However, what surprised him was that although there were many green seal characters, there were only 3 that could cause his soul to tremble. Could it be? Xiaohua, while arranging the green seal characters according to the records, secretly guessed. There are only 3 useful green seal characters, and the green seal characters are all formed by these 3 green seal characters? Or perhaps, I can feel these 3 green seal characters, but I can't feel the others. Just as he was thinking about it, all of the green seal characters had finished assembling and were floating in the air, forming a slightly larger green seal character. It should be like this. Looking at this green seal character that was extremely similar to the other green seal characters, Xiaohua thought to himself. Then, without hesitation, he opened his mouth and spat a mouthful of essence blood on the green seal character. The green seal character suddenly emitted a brilliant golden light. Then, Xiaohua only felt a slight dizziness in his head. The green seal character returned to its faint green appearance and completely covered the shaman puppet. As the green seal text fell, the entire shaman puppet also emitted a green light, which disappeared in a flash. Although the shaman puppet's appearance didn't change, Xiaohua could clearly see that the shaman puppet's mouth was curled up, revealing a slight smile. Seeing this smile, Xiaohua's face also revealed a smile. The shaman puppet couldn't be used infinitely. Each shaman puppet could only be used 3 times. Since Xiaohua succeeded in refining it and revealed a smiling face, it meant that the shaman puppet could still be used. The crying face from before must be the reason that Cultivator didn't know how to refine it. I wonder who that Cultivator is. His storage bag isn't at his waist. Xiaohua smiled and thought. Presumably, everything in his storage bag has become the prey of others in the future. After refining the voodoo puppet, Xiaohua also found a silk ribbon and hung the voodoo puppet in front of his neck, placing it together with the Phoenix auspicious jade talisman. Then, he slightly released his Buddhist consciousness to observe the Mo Bao outside the formation. Just as Xiaohua expected, the Mo Bao outside the formation was still rampant and showed no signs of stopping. Fine, then I'll use this free time to cultivate more. Xiaohua didn't regret it. What he lacked now was time. Wasn't it good to have free time? Immediately, Xiaohua closed his eyes and comprehended the mysteries of the soul spike. That ghost cultivator's soul spike was indeed powerful. It directly pierced into the Niwen Palace. It was definitely the nemesis of divine sense. Previously, when Xiaohua killed the short and fat cultivator, he also didn't expect it to be so powerful. He even prepared the dream execution, true samadhi fire, and a few other moves. However, once the soul spike was used, it immediately showed a miraculous effect. All of the other moves were useless. Therefore, Xiaohua very much liked this method that could restrain a Jindan cultivator's divine ability. -8. Chapter 2000. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, more than 30 days had passed. The ink storm outside the formation began to weaken, and Xiaohua's soul thorn had made great progress. Especially after the first use, Xiaohua combined it with practical use and comprehended more. After another 20 days, the ink storm outside the magic formation finally calmed down, and no more ink sand seeped in from the flaws of the magic formation. However, in the past 50 days of cultivation, in Xiaohua's Zhenyuan, a lot of ink sand was wrapped around the earth crystal Yao milk. At first, Xiaohua didn't care, because the amount of ink sand was small, and he spent all his energy on comprehending the soul thorn, so he rarely refined the earth crystal Yao milk. However, in the last few days, when the soul thorn was completed and he began to refine the earth crystal Yao milk, he discovered a great secret. Because this earth crystal Yao milk was wrapped in ink sand, the ink sand seemed to be able to corrode the earth crystal Yao milk. However, the earth crystal Yao milk was an extremely condensed form of earth power. Therefore, the ink sand's corrosive effect was almost negligible. However, because of this negligible corrosive effect, the The solid earth crystal Yao milk was turned into gaseous or liquid earth power. This effect was much better than Xiaohua's earth crystal Yao milk. Because Xiaohua could directly refine the spiritual energy, he didn't need to face the solid earth crystal Yao milk. Of course, when the ink sand corroded the earth crystal Yao milk, the earth element spiritual energy was also damaged, but in front of the massive amount of earth crystal Yao milk, it was still insignificant. Haha. Xiaohua discovered this phenomenon, and he couldn't help but be overjoyed. His cultivation speed suddenly increased by more than 3 times. Withdraw. Xiaohua saw that the ink storm outside the formation was gone, so he stretched out his hand and grabbed the air. His 5 fingers flashed with a faint light, and hundreds of talismans were instantly collected in his hand. Ah? After Xiaohua withdrew the formation, he scanned with his divine sense and was stunned again. He saw that he was surrounded by 4 or 5 emojiao, which were 3 times bigger than the emojiao he encountered before. Each of them wrapped their wings around their bodies, and pairs of blue eyes stared at him. You're courting death. Xiaohua saw that 2 emojiao were unwilling to be left out, and their bodies twisted and were about to pounce on him. He sneered and performed the soul thorn technique, stabbing at the 2 emojiao. Roar! Roar! The 2 emojiao opened their mouths and rolled on the ground. Their eyes were filled with fear. Since you're here, don't leave. Xiaohua had been eyeing emojiao for a long time. He knew that they were more precious than any green python. If he did not get at least 1 or 2 emojiao in the Black Forest, how could he say that he had been here before? Then, Xiaohua waved his hands and cast 2 earth condensation spells at emojiao. The earth condensation spell had an advantage in this underground area where the earth's spiritual energy was abundant. While emojiao was rolling on the ground, he did not put up any resistance and was immediately restrained by a layer of yellow light. Umidba. Xiaohua sighed. He was hesitant to kill emojiao. However, after thinking for a while, he still took out his spirit storage bag and stored the 2 ink horseshoes. Don't kill if you can. After that, Xiaohua scanned the area with his divine sense again. He found that the emojiao, who had been eyeing him covetously just a moment ago, now had a look of horror in their eyes. The black brilliance on the surface of their bodies flickered, and they slowly retreated. Judging from their cautious looks, it seemed that they were afraid of being discovered by Xiaohua. However, they were also afraid that they could not escape from Xiaohua's evil clutches. They are also afraid of the strong and bully the weak. Xiaohua snorted coldly. Then, he jumped up and flew toward the ground. Although there was no more ink storm in the depths of the ground, there was still a lot of ink storm near the surface. Xiaohua flew for a while and then stopped. After estimating the amount of ink storm was enough, he sat down cross-legged and began to refine the earth crystal Yao milk. After flying for more than 20 days, Xiaohua suddenly found that there were many emojiao corpses near the surface. They must have been killed in the ink storm. Xiaohua was overjoyed. He released the 2 emojiao from his spirit storage bag and collected the emojiao's corpses. The harvest was far beyond Xiaohua's expectation. He had collected more than 1,000 emojiao's corpses. I'm rich. I'm rich. Xiaohua, who had never seen the world, released his divine sense while he was underground. At the same time, he kept emojiao, who had been scanned by his divine sense, into his space. He was beaming with joy, unable to close his mouth. Yes, Zhu Chenghe, Qin Yi, and the other 2 joined forces to kill 2 emojiao, but they failed. However, he had collected more than 1,000 emojiao in just half a day. If this was not a fortune, what was it? As for what the emojiao could be used for and how to make a fortune, Xiaohua, a miser, did not care about it. As long as he could get what he wanted, this was the golden rule that Xiaohua followed in his heart. Where did this kid come from? How dare you steal my things? Xiaohua was excited about his harvest. Suddenly, he felt a spirit sense sweep over him from above. A nascent soul realm cultivator's spirit sense had firmly locked onto him. Damn it! Xiaohua was shocked. Without thinking, he immediately flew underground, ignoring the emojiao's corpses that were close to him. Still want to run. Damn it. I took a risk to dive underground and searched for a long time, but I couldn't find any emojiao. It turns out that they were all taken by a little thief like you. A similarly tall and thin nascent soul realm cultivator appeared in the distance. His body flashed with a yellow light as he chased after Xiao Hua at an extremely fast speed. Xiao Hua's eyes turned as he flew. He used the sky-pilfering sun-swapping technique and gradually changed his appearance. He did not want to be remembered by a nascent soul realm cultivator and be hunted down all day long. Huh. The nascent soul realm cultivator saw that Xiao Hua was diving deeper and deeper, and his Earth Escape talisman was gradually reaching its limit. He couldn't help but be shocked. With a wave of his hand, he used the earth congealing technique and quickly smashed it towards Xiao Hua. Damn it, this guy is too sinister. Xiao Hua felt that the earth chi behind his spirit sense was becoming more and more stagnant. He cursed in his heart and no longer dared to dive deeper. He steeled his heart and rushed towards the surface again. Why are you flying up again? The nascent soul realm cultivator was stunned, and then he sneered. He knew that at this time, there was still a Mozhao above the black forest. The Mozhao covered the sky and raged in the air. Even a nascent soul realm cultivator like him didn't dare to casually go out, for fear that the nascent soul in his Dantian would be covered by the Mozhao's spirit sense and choke it to death. How could a little early foundation establishment realm cultivator like Xiaohua survive? However, this little cultivator's face is very unfamiliar. He's around 50 years old, but he can cultivate to the early foundation establishment realm. And I don't know where he got the Earth Escape talisman. The quality is better than mine. Which sect is he from? Who cares which sect he's from? I'll kill him, and the Emo Zhao in his storage bag is mine. I took a risk to come out and just found 2 Emo Zhao. One of them was thrown away by that brat. He must have some more in his storage bag. But then, the nascent soul realm cultivator was bewildered. Xiao Hua first dived down and then flew up. His entire body flew into the shape of a valley in front of him. The time and distance he took to do so was obviously longer than his own. Admittedly, he had rushed over from afar, but he had already escaped for such a long time. He should have caught up with Xiao Hua long ago. However, in his spirit sense, the distance between him and Xiao Hua didn't seem to have shortened at all. Could it be that a nascent soul realm enemy who hid his cultivation has set up a trap ahead? The nascent soul realm cultivator was somewhat hesitant. After all, Xiao Hua's performance as a foundation establishment realm cultivator was too astonishing. It didn't conform to common sense. Just as the nascent soul realm cultivator was stunned for a moment, Xiao Hua had already reached the same height as him. Moreover, he didn't stop and continued to escape upwards. Although there are many nascent soul realm cultivators in the Dawn Rain continent, I can recognize most of them. This brat. The nascent soul realm cultivator changed his mind and clapped his hand again. A shiny talisman appeared in his hand. It was the Earth Escape talisman. When he clapped his hand, the dim yellow light around his body lit up again. The background of the Emo Zhao Black Forest is too strange. There are too many Emo sand. Ordinary 5 elements escape technique can't be used. If I didn't find this Earth Escape talisman, I wouldn't have been able to escape to such a deep place. If I hid on the ground like others, I would be able to escape the Emo Zhao, but I would also be able to obtain Emo Zhao's corpse. Thinking of Emo Zhao's corpse, the nascent soul realm cultivator's eyes lit up again. This Emo Zhao's magical use is something I found in an ancient book. I still have to test it. If it can be used, wouldn't my magic power increase by leaps and bounds? Mid-nascent soul realm is just around the corner. Besides, if I don't get more Emo Zhao's corpse now, wouldn't this Earth Escape talisman be wasted? The nascent soul realm cultivator's divine sense had already scanned the surroundings. He didn't see any Emo Zhao's corpse, so he could only target Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua was too petty. If you left more than 10 Emo Zhao's corpse here, would the nascent soul realm cultivator chase you? Stay here. After the nascent soul realm cultivator finished thinking, he didn't hesitate anymore. He rubbed his hands together and released a dark green light. As the nascent soul realm cultivator waved his hands, the light turned into dozens of rope-like lights and chased after Xiao Hua at an incomparable speed. Damn it! Xiao Hua released his divine sense. He had already sensed the magic power in the light that was causing the true yuan in his meridians to stagnate. He couldn't help but curse inwardly. I'm just a Foundation establishment realm cultivator. Is it worth it to chase after me like this? Yes, although Xiao Hua had already mastered the Bright Thunder escape technique, he was only a gold core realm cultivator. Speaking of which, his flying speed was similar to a late gold core realm cultivator. It was far from being comparable to a nascent soul realm cultivator. Fortunately, he was now underground. The nascent soul realm cultivator used the Earth Escape talisman that he was not familiar with. If he was in midair, he would have already been captured by the nascent soul realm cultivator. Run for a while more. Xiao Hua's divine sense had already touched a lot of Imo Zhao, and he also felt the ferocity of Imo Bao on the ground. Although he didn't know whether he would live or die if he went deep into Imo Bao's body, he knew that as long as he fell into the hands of this nascent soul realm cultivator, his soul would definitely be searched. -8. Chapter 2001. Xiao Hua had already pushed his magic power to the limit. The true essence in his body rapidly rotated, and magic power rushed to the surface of Xiao Hua's body as if it didn't need spirit stones. However, cultivation was cultivation, and there was no shortcut. Although Xiao Hua had many secret manuals, in front of absolute strength, everything was nothing. Absolute nothingness. The rope-like radiance immediately flew to Xiao Hua's feet. Xiao Hua's mind was filled with thoughts. Spiritual fire, flying sword, true samadhi fire, soul thorn, and so on, seemed to be able to resist one or two of them. However, the radiance controlled the surrounding spiritual energy, completely killing any of his delusions. Xiao Hua understood that the spiritual fire might be able to break through this radiance. But what about after 2 spiritual fires? Rather than that, it was better to keep it a secret. At this time, the more secret techniques he had, the more he would attract a fatal disaster. Zilala, just as Xiao Hua gave up resisting, the radiance wrapped around Xiao Hua's feet. In an instant, the magic power in his feet was frozen. Moreover, the radiance followed Xiao Hua's body, and all of his magic power was incomparably stagnant. Even if Xiao Hua activated the dragonization art, it had no effect. So it's a Foundation establishment, baby. The nascent soul cultivator in the distance snorted. His previous vigilance was completely gone. After all, Xiao Hua's methods were not the reaction of a nascent soul cultivator, or even a golden core cultivator. However, at this time, from behind the nascent soul cultivator, there was a roar. Although it was much weaker than Imo Bao's, it was still incomparably strong. Together with a furious divine sense, it rushed straight towards the nascent soul cultivator. The nascent soul cultivator's divine sense swept back and was immediately shocked. He saw a 3 zhang thick and several zhang long giant Imo Bao flapping its huge wings and flying towards the nascent soul cultivator. Giant Imo Bao? The nascent soul cultivator was overjoyed. At this time, he couldn't care less about Xiao Hua in front of him. His figure suddenly flew up, and while dodging the Imo Bao, he rubbed his hands together, and rays of light flew towards the giant Imo Bao. Unfortunately, the giant Imo Bao flapped its wings, and rays of black sand flew over, blocking the rays of light. At the same time, it opened its mouth, and balls of black air flew over like small fish blowing bubbles. These bubbles were bursting and melting the multicolored light. Seeing this, the nascent soul cultivator was somewhat discouraged. The giant ink centipede's body was too huge, and the black skin on the surface of its body had the characteristic of restraining the ink sand, so it was not afraid of the cultivator's magic. Although it was not difficult for the nascent soul cultivator to kill the giant ink centipede in the air of the ink centipede black forest, it would be somewhat difficult to do so on the ground. Just as the nascent soul cultivator slapped his forehead and was about to summon his Dharma treasure, an unpleasant sound rang out from beneath his feet. The nascent soul cultivator scanned the area with his divine sense, and his face unconsciously turned ugly. Not far from his feet, a dozen or so giant ink puppets emerged from the ground. They flapped their wings and flew toward the cultivator. Damn it, why didn't I notice it just now? The nascent soul realm cultivator regretted his decision. However, he knew that Imo Zhao was a ferocious creature of the earth element. It was not easy for him to be discovered by a cultivator's divine sense if he hid underground. Let's go. The nascent soul cultivator made up his mind and flew toward Xiaohua. In his heart, he was still thinking about those Emo Zhao corpses that might exist, but in fact, they really do exist. However, as soon as he moved, Xiaohua's figure was even faster. He scuttled to the ground like a fleeing rabbit. Huh, how can this guy move again? The nascent soul cultivator was slightly stunned. Obviously, the ink sand from the giant ink centipede had blown onto Xiaohua's body. Under the corrosion of the ink sand and Xiaohua's enormous strength, the nascent soul cultivator's confinement Dharma treasure had just been broken free. Oomph! The nascent soul cultivator rubbed his hands again without hesitation, wanting to confine Xiaohua. However, at this moment, the ink sand from the dozen or so giant ink centipede flew toward him. The nascent soul cultivator did not dare to not use a Dharma treasure to avoid it. When he dodged the huge amount of ink sand and chased after Xiaohua again, Xiaohua had already fled far away. Oomph! This guy is definitely up to something. The nascent soul cultivator naturally would not let Xiaohua go. Seeing that Xiaohua was still quite a distance away from the ground, he waved his hand again. A rope-like Dharma treasure flashed with a brilliant brilliance and was about to attack Xiaohua, however. At this moment, the nascent soul cultivator's body began to flicker with an earth-yellow brilliance. The Earth Escape talisman seemed to be losing its effect. Damn it! The nascent soul cultivator couldn't help but curse inwardly. He stopped channeling his magic power and reached out to take out another talisman. By the time he placed the talisman on himself and was about to unleash his magic treasure, the dozen or so inksand stream cultivators once again charged at him from all directions. Go! The nascent soul cultivator was furious. He pointed his finger, and the Dharma treasure flew like a spirit snake toward the giant ink centipede closest to him. His figure swayed, and he actually disappeared from his original position. In a moment, he reappeared about 10 zhang away. However, when he reappeared, the nascent soul cultivator's face was somewhat abnormal. Moreover, the Earth Escape talisman's brilliance had dimmed a bit. Seeing that his Dharma treasure was being pushed up high by the giant ink centipede's Dharma treasure and was unable to do anything, the nascent soul cultivator slapped his forehead and instantly released his pressure. Not only did it rush toward the giant ink centipede, it also pressed down on Xiaohua. However, when Xiaohua's figure was slightly sluggish, the nascent soul cultivator's divine sense suddenly felt a piercing pain like a nail. Ouch! The nascent soul cultivator could not help but exclaim in a low voice. He looked at Xiaohua in disbelief. After a slight sluggishness, his figure once again shot up. Then, he endured the pain and spread out his divine sense. Strange. Seeing that there was no one nearby and only a dozen or so giant ink centipedes eyeing him covetously, the nascent soul cultivator unconsciously narrowed his eyes and looked at Xiaohua. Could it be that this little cultivator's body still has some secret technique? Since he had this kind of judgment, the nascent soul cultivator would not let Xiaohua go. He pointed his finger, and the Dharma treasure once again flashed with brilliance and flew toward Xiaohua. While he was dealing with the giant ink centipede, he also flew toward Xiaohua. It's hard to escape this calamity. Seeing the Dharma treasure flying closer and the surrounding spiritual chi of heaven and earth being completely controlled, Xiaohua cursed in his heart. He opened his mouth and the scarlet spiritual fire slightly revolved in the air, turning into a thin thread and wrapping around the rope. Hiss! With a light sound, the brilliance on the rope flickered. The rope was like a dying frozen snake, stopping in midair. Hiss! The nascent soul cultivator was shocked. He did not expect that Xiaohua would actually be able to injure his Dharma treasure. At the same time, the nascent soul cultivator was furious. Yes, he was really furious. In his divine sense, he had already seen that the Dharma treasure was almost completely destroyed. If he wanted to repair it, he did not know how much energy and materials he would have to spend. Humph! The nascent soul cultivator slapped his forehead. A large hand appeared from the top of his head and directly grabbed at Xiaohua. -8. Chapter 2002. When the hand reached out from the nascent soul cultivator's head, it was only a few feet long. Then, as it soared, it sucked in the surrounding spiritual energy. When it was not far from Xiaohua, it had already grown to 10 feet long. Of course, Xiaohua had seen this long ago. He was trying his best to escape above his head, but when the giant hand came down, the surrounding space suddenly gave birth to a kind of force that Xiaohua couldn't resist. Not only did the true essence in Xiaohua's meridians come to a standstill, unable to flow in the slightest, but even his body was grabbed, unable to move in the slightest. Forget it. Xiaohua's expression was normal. He naturally knew that the nascent soul cultivator's methods were endless. He only wanted to sneak out of the ground. Being captured alive was not out of Xiaohua's expectations. Moreover, at this time, the nascent soul cultivator's hand was quite powerful. It flashed with a faint green color. Not far away, the dozen or so giant ink puppets attacking the cultivator hesitated and stopped. Let's see where you can run to. The nascent soul cultivator sneered. He urged his magic power to escape and capture Xiaohua. Coincidentally, with a loud woo sound, a huge storm of ink sand suddenly appeared on the surface of the earth where there were already some aftershocks of the ink storm. It came rushing down from the surface of the earth. Swish, swish, swish. Countless ink storms quickly washed over the nascent soul cultivator's hand. The nascent soul cultivator did not dare to be negligent. He slapped his hand, and a dark green ring flew out from his storage bag. A thick layer of brilliance completely covered him. At this time, the nascent soul cultivator looked at Xiaohua in disbelief. Xiaohua's body actually moved, although it was only a slight movement. Then, he saw Xiaohua spit out a red spark. This time, the spark turned into a thin line and burned Xiaohua's body. Xiaohua's body flashed with little sparks, as if he was completely ignited by the spark. Looking at Xiaohua again, he raised his hands and took out two huge demonic hammers. He crazily hammered his body for a while. What caused the nascent soul cultivator to be dumbstruck was that after Xiaohua's crazy actions, his entire body broke free from the giant hand like a fish. Like a moth flying into a flame, he threw himself into the ink storm that was once again swarming over without hesitation. Is there something wrong with this cultivator's brain? The nascent soul cultivator was stunned. I just want to take Emo Zhao's corpse from him. I don't necessarily want to kill him. How could he commit suicide like this? Inside his storage bag, could there be an earth-shattering, unspeakable secret? He actually risked his life to charge into Emo Bao's territory, where even nascent soul cultivators don't dare to enter. He didn't want me to capture him, but as the nascent soul cultivator saw the ink swarm violently rushing towards his hand once more, he didn't dare to be negligent. He quickly retracted his hand, but at the same time, dozens of giant ink swarm pounced towards him once more, vowing that they wouldn't let him off. Damn it, all I did was take Emo Zhao's corpse. Why are all of you so desperate? That guy was so reckless just now. Did he take dozens of them? Why don't you go and vent your anger on him? Why are you looking for me? The nascent soul cultivator didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He understood that Emo Zhao was a ferocious beast. Once Emo Zhao died, its corpse would be devoured by other Emo Zhao. This time, he didn't know how many Emo Zhao had died in the ink swarm. It was a good opportunity for these giant Emo Zhao to grow. It was precisely because of the corpse in his storage bag that the giant Emo Zhao coveted it. But the problem was, why didn't these giant Emo Zhao chase after Xiaohua? Could it be that I've wronged that guy? The nascent soul cultivator didn't want to waste his magic power. While escaping from the giant Emo Zhao, he thought. Unfortunately, even if the nascent soul cultivator was 100 times smarter, he would never be able to guess the number of Emo Zhao's corpses piled up like a mountain in Xiaohua's space. Yes, this was the real reason why the giant Emo Zhao chased after the nascent soul cultivator. Xiaohua, who broke free from the nascent soul cultivator's shackles, was now like a tiny little bird in the ocean waves. He was lifted out from the ground by the ink swarm. In a situation where he struggled to no avail, he had no choice but to fly along with the waves of the ink swarm. The omnipresent ink swarm invaded Xiaohua's physical body, dharma body, meridians, blood vessels, and other places. In a short moment, Xiaohua's meridians were blocked. The ink swarm also gathered at the 13,200 million points of his physical body and Dharma body. Moreover, as the ink swarm increased, it also became bigger. Damn it! Xiaohua felt the changes in his body. Naturally, he knew how powerful it was. He tried to urge his magic power, but only a sliver of it could be used. It was like trying to put out a burning cart of firewood with a cup of water. Helpless, Xiaohua could only use the ethereal steps. He was barely able to maintain a slight balance in the ink swarm. With a wong sound, a thick black wood flew out from Xiaohua's side and directly smashed towards his waist. Looking at the strength of the black wood, it should be at least 1,000 caddies. At this moment, Xiaohua, who did not have any magic power to protect his body, was hit by the black wood. He would definitely lose his life like the gold core old man from before. However, how could Xiaohua be such an ordinary cultivator? With a wave of his hand, he took out the devil hammer and waved it slightly. With a cottage sound, the thick black wood was broken into 2 pieces. The broken black wood brushed past Xiaohua's body and frantically flew to other places. Just as Xiaohua took out the devil hammer and his entire body landed, a bright light suddenly flashed in his mind. This devil hammer is so heavy, but it actually did not smash the black wood into pieces. This black wood, its texture is definitely not ordinary. Xiaohua came to a realization. Moreover, even Imo Zhao hid under the black forest to hide from Imo Zhao. What about the black wood? It has no legs. Where could it hide? How could it not be destroyed by the ink swarm? Thinking of this, Xiaohua raised his head and looked at the nearby black wood, which was already as big as a wall. Without any hesitation, he walked over to her. At this moment, the ink swarm was very fierce. The whistling wind blew away the branches and leaves of the black wood. Xiaohua held the incomparably heavy devil hammer, and his entire body swayed in the ink swarm. Fortunately, it was only a few steps. Xiaohua waved his hand, and the devil hammer returned to his space. In an instant, his body was blown up by the ink swarm, and he directly pounced on the black wood in front of him. Seeing that the matter was settled, Xiaohua tried his best to urge the little bit of magic power he had left and used the wood escape technique. Xiaohua's body flashed with a light green brilliance, and he disappeared into the black wood. Once he entered the black wood, Xiaohua felt as if he was in a different world. The entire world was peaceful. However, Xiaohua did not have any leisure mood at this moment. He even rejoiced that he managed to escape. Instead, he hurriedly used his inner vision to check his meridians. At this moment, Xiaohua's meridians were completely filled with black sand. All of his meridians were blocked, and there was not a trace of true essence. Of course, Xiaohua used the spirit fire twice in succession underground, and the true essence in his body had long been completely consumed. The little bit he had left was used to use the wood escape technique. His true essence was not corroded by the black sand. However, the thing that worried Xiaohua the most was that his dantian was filled with ink sand as well, and the faint point from before had already been corroded by the ink sand at this moment and vanished. It was even to the extent that his entire dantian and meridians seemed to be filled with a feeling of numbness and itchiness, as if countless ants were lightly biting him. This was also Xiaohua. His meridians cultivated the dragon transformation art, and he had already been baptized by the lightning tribulation when he was building his foundation. He could be considered to have been reborn. At this moment, he was still able to endure the corrosion of the black sand. If it was someone else, they would have already suffered irreparable damage. Xiaohua wanted to use the spirit fire to see if it was effective against the black sand. However, he did not have the slightest bit of magic power and was simply powerless to urge it. After thinking for a moment, he urged the dragon transformation art. Like a huge dragon swinging its tail, he wanted to first eliminate the black sand that was corroding his meridians. However, right now, his entire meridians were filled with black sand. After getting rid of a layer, the rest of the black sand stuck to him, and there were countless of them. What should I do? Xiaohua was somewhat dazed. At this moment, Xiaohua's entire body flickered with brilliance. Obviously, his magic power to support the wood escape technique was already insufficient. I'd better use the mental cultivation method first. Xiaohua made a prompt decision and immediately urged the earth expansion technique. He wanted to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth from the outside world to refine the earth crystal Yao milk. However, it was fine if he did not draw spiritual energy. Once he drew spiritual energy, he discovered that the entire black wood was filled with condensed black sand. That black sand was like a stubborn stone, blocking all the cracks. Not even the slightest bit of spiritual energy of heaven and earth could enter. Xiaohua suddenly understood. Of course, at every moment, the black wood was within the black sand. How could it not absorb the black sand? It was also because it absorbed an extremely large amount of black sand that the black wood was so hard and so calm inside. That was why the black sand could not invade. What should I do now? Xiaohua was again at his wit's end. Without true essence in his meridians, he could not urge his magic power. Without magic power, the wood escape technique could not last for long. He would definitely be squeezed out of the black wood. Facing the overflowing black sand, he was exposed to the black sand for a moment just now. All of his cultivation was knocked down, and he was completely supported by the dragon transformation art. If he stayed in the black sand for a long time, he would definitely be corroded by the black sand and become immortal. However, just as Xiaohua was in a hurry, the black sand in his meridians slightly loosened again. Xiaohua was overjoyed. When he looked carefully, he discovered that the corroded black sand near the earth crystal Yao milk disappeared a little. Moreover, even more earth-type spiritual energy of heaven and earth was actually forming in Xiaohua's meridians. Great! Xiaohua was overjoyed. On one hand, he activated the dragon transformation art, and on the other, he hurriedly activated the mental cultivation method of earth expansion. When the spiritual energy seeped out from the gaps in the ink sand's meridians, he hurriedly refined the spiritual energy, turning it into threads of true essence. Before the brilliance of the wood escape technique flashed, he hurriedly replenished his magic power. Seeing the light green brilliance around Xiaohua gradually stabilizing, Xiaohua finally relaxed. He took the time to examine his body, bloodline, dharma body, and other places. There is not a trace of black sand in my bloodline. Xiaohua was slightly surprised. Although there is some black sand in my body, it seems to be condensed together. It is somewhat similar to the black sand in the black wood. Dharma body. Xiaohua suddenly had some understanding. -8. Chapter 2003. Xiaohua's phoenix dharma body was condensed from the wind of the netherworld, so it wasn't solid at all. At this time, when he saw the ink sand occupying the dharma body and not corroding the dharma body, he was enlightened. With a shake of his arms, the dharma body flew out of his body and out of the black wood. The phoenix dharma body was like the wind of the netherworld, so it did not seem to be blown away by the ink storm. It swayed as it flew to the top of the black tree. The black tree was huge, so the phoenix dharma body was not particularly obvious. As it spread its wings, the ink sand that was everywhere rushed into the dharma body. It quickly gathered at the 132 million points and expanded. Good. Xiaohua could not help but laugh again. I have this dharma body cast with ink sand. Even if I meet Huangyi again, she can't just blow this dharma body away, right? Soon after, he no longer paid attention to the dharma body and concentrated on refining the spiritual qi. He wanted to remove the ink sand from his meridians as soon as possible. However, at the beginning, there was very little true qi. Xiaohua could only refine it bit by bit. He even had time to think about other things. For example, why didn't the ink sand seep into the black tree? For example, who was that nascent soul cultivator Xiaohua met? But after waiting for a few hours, when the ink sand in his meridians decreased by 10%, Xiaohua felt that something was wrong. An unprecedented crisis seemed to quietly descend on Xiaohua's meridians. This was because, under the corrosion of the black sand, the earth attribute heaven and earth spiritual qi within the earth crystal Yao milk was released without any restraint. It was far from the orderly process when Xiaohua was refining it himself, and the heaven and earth spiritual qi was extremely abundant. This was only the beginning. But the heaven and earth spiritual qi was already so abundant that Xiaohua was somewhat overwhelmed. If in the future, there would definitely be a lot of spiritual qi being corroded by the ink sand, then Xiaohua would not be able to refine it. Not only would his meridians and dantian explode, even his physical body would be hard to protect. Damn it! Xiaohua scratched his ears and cheeks. He was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. What he had to do now was either to refine the spiritual qi or to stop the ink sand from corroding the earth crystal Yao milk. But what method did he have to stop the ink sand? Xiaohua even wanted to jump out of the black wood and let the ink sand block his meridians again. But obviously, Xiaohua understood that even if he went out now and the black sand continued to block his meridians, the amount of black sand corroding the earth crystal Yao milk would only increase, not decrease. In other words, before the earth crystal Yao milk was completely corroded, and before a huge amount of earth-attributed spiritual energy was released, Xiaohua would only have more chances to explode. After thinking for a moment, Xiaohua couldn't think of any way to deal with such a huge crisis. Let's fight. This is also a great opportunity. Xiaohua was helpless. He hurriedly sat down cross-legged and activated the dragon transformation art with all his might. At the same time, he immersed his mind into the space and connected to the primordial spirit brand in the heavenly Tao space. He hurriedly activated the earth expansion technique, hoping that he could use a stupid method before he thought of a way. Damn it! Why am I so stupid? How could I possibly explode? Xiaohua just activated his cultivation method and wanted to curse himself, because not long after his true essence was formed, it was immediately corroded by the black sand and disappeared. His meridians simply couldn't store true essence. Alas, what a pity for the earth crystal Yao milk. Xiaohua's heart calmed down a little, but his heart ached for his earth crystal Yao milk. However, his heart only ached for a moment, and he wanted to slap his own mouth again. How could things be as simple as he thought? Although his true essence was corroded, the amount of black sand that disappeared was not much. It seemed that this black sand was the nemesis of true essence. Moreover, in the space created by the disappearance of true essence, more spiritual energy gathered, and the volume was far greater than the amount of true essence that disappeared. What Xiaohua needed to do now was to refine the spiritual energy into true essence. There was no other way. Xiaohua's true essence had never flowed like this before. Circle after circle, it was like a small stream flowing down from the top of a mountain. It avoided the layers of black sand and flowed into the dantian where the black sand gathered. Xiaohua's dantian was also filled with black sand at this time. Every time a trace of true essence entered, it would be corroded by the black sand, and the amount of black sand would also decrease. Although there was a lot of black sand in his dantian, it couldn't stop Xiaohua's true essence from flowing like water. First it was a small stream, then it was a small river, and then it was like a river. After waiting for several hours, Xiaohua's head was full of sweat. He clenched his teeth and activated his cultivation method. When he was in a state of madness, the black sand in his dantian was finally emptied, and the moment the black sand was emptied, his entire dantian slightly trembled, as if everything had started anew. The true essence that was once again injected rapidly rushed into the dantian where the virtual dot disappeared. A brand new, even more condensed little dot was born again, and after the true essence injected into the virtual dot suddenly disappeared, it reappeared. This time, it was different from before. The density of the true essence had more than doubled, and its volume had naturally shrunk again. And after the transformation, the majority of the true essence remained in the dantian, and a very small part once again rushed into the meridians. Obviously, Xiaohua's cultivation had made great progress after the destruction, but at this time, Xiaohua was anxiously refining the spiritual energy, paying attention to the growth of the spiritual energy with all his attention. He simply didn't notice the change in his true essence, because at this time, the speed at which the black sand was disappearing couldn't compare to the speed at which the spiritual energy was being produced. Even though the true essence had shrunk by more than half, the spiritual energy contained in the earth crystal Yao milk was really too much. Now, only half of it had disappeared. What method? What method? Xiaohua was burning with impatience. On one hand, he was thinking of a method, and on the other hand, he had to calmly comprehend the heavenly Tao. He had to increase the speed of refining the spiritual energy as much as possible. It was really difficult for him. Roar, right at this time, Xiaohua's dragon transformation art seemed to have some changes. His entire meridians began to tremble, and a faint dragon roar was produced in Xiaohua's body, as if his meridians were about to fly away. At first, it just so happened that it was in Xiaohua's middle dantian. Xiaohua felt that the dragon-like meridians didn't have a dragon head, or perhaps the dragon head was in the middle dantian and was tightly pressed down by an incomparably huge thing. The dragon-like meridians couldn't fly away. Ah? Xiaohua was shocked. A kind of inexplicable uneasiness arose in his heart. Could it be? Could it be? Xiaohua mumbled for a long time, but still couldn't come up with anything. It seemed that apart from his middle dantian being imprisoned like the Niwen Palace, he couldn't think of any other reason. Dawn Rain Continent's martial arts were to cultivate the lower dantian and didn't involve the middle dantian at all. All cultivators also wouldn't check the middle dantian. Of course, Xiaohua also didn't think of this at all. And at this time, he suddenly discovered that his middle dantian was actually different. How could he not be shocked? -8. Chapter 2004. Could it be that I'm really a celestial from overseas? Xiaohua seemed to think of the legendary celestial clan. He heard that they were celestials who only cultivated and didn't practice magic, or cultivators who cultivated the middle dantian. Roar. Under the dragon transformation art, Xiaohua's meridians seemed to have expanded a lot, but it clearly wasn't the limit. However, his meridians were already somewhat unable to bear it. They were restless, as if trying to break free from the shackles of his middle dantian. Xiaohua had already sensed the previous danger, but he still didn't feel the danger in front of him. What he was facing was not only the risk of his meridians bursting, but also the middle dantian, where the dragon head of his meridians was. The black and white seal was emitting a faint brilliance. It was extremely easy to suppress the vibration of his meridians. Moreover, an incomparably valiant spiritual energy fluctuation was emitted from it and, fortunately, although the ink storm in the Ink Zhao Black Forest was weakened, it was still ferocious. These spiritual energy fluctuations had just been emitted when they were corroded, worn down, and blocked by the nemesis of spiritual energy. Who exactly is this young master's enemy? Xiaohua clenched his teeth, abnormally angry. Not only did they seal this young master's Niwen Palace, they even sealed this young master's middle dantian. Looks like this young master isn't an ordinary person who doesn't know how to cultivate. Moreover, this young master's cultivation is completely different from the cultivation methods of Xiaoyu continent. This young master's cultivation before being sealed might also be extremely high. The reason why this young master had to cultivate from the first level of qi refining, bit by bit, was because this young master's enemy completely sealed this young master's cultivation. However, after being angry for a moment, Xiaohua was somewhat puzzled. Why just seal it? If it was an enemy, wouldn't it be fine if they just killed this young master or completely crippled this young master's cultivation? Why would they still waste a lot of energy to seal this young master? Could it be that they weren't afraid that this young master would cultivate again? Weren't they afraid that this young master would break the seal and kill his way back to take revenge on them? Hee, I know. They destroyed this young master's memory. Wasn't it because they didn't want this young master to know who they were? Weren't they afraid that this young master would go back to take revenge? Xiaohua coldly thought. In that case, this young master's previous cultivation was definitely not inferior to this enemy's. They couldn't kill this young master, so they had no choice but to use this method. Since that's the case, how can I disappoint you all? Xiaohua's viciousness grew from the side of his guts, and he fiercely said, This young master will definitely not die here. I must recover my memories, recover my magic power, and find out who my enemy is. However, after his lofty aspirations, Xiaohua was only excited for a moment before he became dejected again. Not to mention that his enemy's cultivation was thousands of times higher than his. Even in his current predicament, he didn't have any means to escape. What revenge was there to talk about? At this moment, his meridians shook a few more times. The shaking reached his middle dantian and stopped again. Right now, his meridians were probably more than 10 times larger than before. The heaven and earth spiritual chi in them had nowhere to go. Xiao Hua's meridians had the possibility of exploding at any moment. In the area where the earth crystal Yao milk was located, 30% of the black spots were still surrounded by a large amount of black sand. Jade blood pill heart refines. In his urgency, this arcane effort suddenly appeared in Xiao Hua's mind. Damn it, I'm really a genius. Xiao Hua carefully examined the arcane effort that flashed through his mind. He couldn't help but smile. No matter what this arcane effort was, as long as it could consume the true essence in his meridians, it would be fine. Fight. Xiao Hua didn't have time to finish reading the arcane effort. He already knew that he had used it countless times before. He also didn't have time to consider the effects of touching his Niwen Palace. He hurriedly activated the Jade Blood Pill Heart Refines technique. Following the activation of Xiao Hua's arcane effort, a wisp of heart fire was born from Xiao Hua's true essence. This heart fire was like a single spark that started a prairie fire, igniting his entire meridians and even the true essence in his lower dantian. Hong! A light sound shook Xiao Hua's mind. The true essence in Xiao Hua's meridians had completely disappeared. Of course, when the true essence disappeared, the pain also came as expected. A feeling more painful than needles and thorns came from Xiao Hua's Buddha Sarira's big belly. It came from Xiao Hua's sealed Niwen Palace. Moreover, the black and white seal outside the Niwen Palace was the same as the seal in his middle dantian. It also emitted a faint brilliance, and a valiant spiritual energy was immediately emitted. Good. Xiao Hua didn't have time to care about the cold sweat on his forehead. He hurriedly activated his arcane effort to refine the heaven and earth spiritual energy in his meridians. 100 days passed. At the beginning, Xiao Hua had to use the Jade Blood Pill Heart Refines technique once every 12 hours to endure the inhumane torture. But as time passed, after less than 10 days, it was changed to every 10 hours. In the end, it was changed to every 1 hour. Damn it! If this continues, even if this young master doesn't die from this headache, this young master's enemies will come looking for me. After using the Jade Blood Pill Heart Refines technique so many times, Xiao Hua had already felt the slight changes in the seal on his Niwen Palace. He was very distressed as he thought, but fortunately, the earth crystal Yao milk has almost been completely refined by this young master. Although the meridians refined by the dragon transformation art have expanded several times, they are still wandering around the limit. I can barely cope with it. As long as I use the Jade Blood Pill Heart Refines technique a few more times, it will be done. Xiao Hua refined his Zhen Yuan while releasing his divine sense. At this time, although the ink cloud black forest was covered with ink sand, it was already the end of the ink storm. It was no longer as devastating as before. Not good. Xiao Hua saw that his Dharma body was still outside, and suddenly thought, other people's Dharma body is transformed from their blood vessels. This young master's Dharma body appeared when he cultivated the great strength Vajra Dharma body. Now that it has been filled with ink sand, can this young master still take it back? Even if I take it back, will it swallow my Jinyuan? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua hurriedly and carefully withdrew the phoenix celestial body. However, at this time, the phoenix celestial body was already half full. He saw that the 13,200 virtual points wrapped around this solid black sand, which was already as solid as black wood. Outside the black sand, there was also the swirling netherworld wind. Fortunately, nothing unexpected happened. I can still take it back. Xiao Hua waited for the Dharma body to merge into his body, and there was no change. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. But then he complained, damn it, what is this? The Dharma body has been outside for more than 100 days, and it still hasn't been filled. This young master just went out for a moment and was already tormented to the point of death. This damned heavens, what are they thinking? Forget it, forget it. Let's hurry up and clean up all the ink sand. Xiao Hua complained, but in his heart, there was no neglect. He gathered his strength and used the Jade Blood Pill Heart Refines technique several times in succession. After several hours, he completely cleaned up all the ink sand. -8. Chapter 2005. However, what Xiao Hua didn't know was that when Xiao Hua activated the Jade Blood Pill Refining Heart, the spiritual power fluctuation on the seal finally broke through the black sand of the Ink Zhao Black Forest. It was extremely weak, but extremely fast. It spread out at a speed that Xiao Hua couldn't imagine, and the spiritual power actually spread in two different directions, in just half a day's time. In two cave residences that were extremely far away from the Ink Zhao Black Forest, one was a white-haired old man with a youthful face, and the other was a dignified middle-aged cultivator. Both of them were in closed-door cultivation, and the spiritual power fluctuation easily broke through the restriction that they had set up. Obviously, this spiritual power fluctuation was extremely important. Almost at the same time, the two of them opened their eyes. Their expressions changed slightly, and they hurriedly urged their magic power to change their hand seals. The two people's hand seals were different, but they were both incomparably complicated. After waiting for half a meal's worth of time, the two of them let out a soft shout and struck the air. One of them had a mirror in front of him, the other had a misty color. However, both of them couldn't see anything after looking at it for a long time. They both frowned slightly. The middle-aged cultivator stood up and waved his hand, and a rainbow appeared. He said a few words to it, and then the rainbow flew away. The middle-aged cultivator wasn't in a hurry to cultivate, and he slightly paced. Strange. It seems like the fluctuation of the seal, but it seems like something is wrong. Could it be that it wasn't done by that old ghost? Well, it shouldn't be. That old ghost made a hard oath that he wouldn't act on his own accord. Could it be that kid who did it? However, it's only been a few decades. It's impossible for him to cultivate to such a high level. Could it be that the other old farts saw it? Even more impossible, right? They saw the seal and didn't know that it was done by us. Those with higher cultivation than us wouldn't act, and those with lower cultivation wouldn't even dare to act? Could it be that there are other changes? The white-haired old man paced back and forth, and he secretly said, however, looking at the spiritual power coming from the seal, there shouldn't be any problems with the seal. There shouldn't be any problems with the plan that we agreed on with that old fart. But how can we not break the hard oath and not let that old ghost know? Alas, the hard oath that day was really strict. I'm afraid there are some problems. After smoking half a cigarette, both of their eyes lit up almost at the same time. Xiao Hua, who was far away in the Ink Zhao Black Forest, naturally couldn't know this. At this time, he was shrouded in a thick layer of surprise and had no time to care about other things. In the previous 100 days, he was in a race against time. He used the blood core refining heart technique to maintain the space in his meridians, S-meridian space meridians, for fear of the huge amount of heaven and earth spirit chi of heaven's cores, and blood's heart's cultivation test heart's SDB used, S's meridians. Just a moment ago, when the last trace of ink sand corroded the earth-type heaven and earth spirit chi of heaven and earth, Xiao Hua used the blood core refining heart technique for the last time, transforming all the true essence in his body into a heart fire that directly rushed into his Niwen palace. That was really the most painful piercing pain in the past 100 days, and the meridians in his body also returned to normal. Naturally, they were more than twice as big as before. Only at this time did Xiao Hua completely calm down. Then, Xiao Hua let out a long sigh of relief. Activating his heart technique, he once again refined the last trace of earth crystal Yao milk in his meridians. As the heaven and earth spirit chi of heaven and earth transformed into true essence, it once again flowed smoothly in his meridians, rushing into his lower dantian. When it rushed into that somewhat solid point, Xiao Hua shockingly discovered that he seemed to have already advanced to the middle stage of foundation establishment. Good heavens, sure enough, there is a great terror between life and death. Xiao Hua was so surprised that he was speechless. Originally, I thought that if other people needed 30 years to reach the early stage of foundation establishment, I would need at least 40 years, or even 50 years. Therefore, I didn't concentrate on practicing the heart technique and usually just did routine homework. Even in these 3 years, I only focused on formations. Who would have thought that in a mere 100 days in this ink Zhao black forest, I would finish what other people needed 30 years to do? Really, really, I don't know what to say. Is this young master a genius? Moreover, according to eldest senior brother, there is a bottleneck from the early stage of foundation establishment to the middle stage of foundation establishment. There must be comprehension and accumulation. How come this young master didn't have any? How come everything went so smoothly? It seems like, just now, I didn't have the slightest feeling of a breakthrough. However, my meridians and dharma body have some improvements, but bone tempering, there are some problems. It seems like there is no feeling of improvement like before. Could it be? In fact, in the 1 year when Xiao Hua was in the early stage of foundation establishment, although he only focused on manipulating the spiritual fire, how could the spiritual fire be easily manipulated? Although Xiao Hua couldn't practice the heart technique, the circulation of the true essence and the operation of the heart technique were the micromanipulation of the Dharma power. Xiao Hua was very careful at every moment, and he constantly strived for perfection. His hard work in that 1 year was far more than other people's 5 years. Moreover, in Tianmin Mountain, the master who set up the formation was not an ordinary person. A formation that could kill a nascent soul cultivator, the formation master was at least a nascent soul cultivator. Xiao Hua, with the cultivation of the early stage of foundation establishment, repaired the formation with the courtesy of the gold core cultivator, which was far beyond his own cultivation limit. Xiao Hua was able to repair all the formations in Tianmin Mountain in 3 years, and the hard work he put in was more than other people's 10 years of effort. Moreover, Huang Yi's painful experience gave Xiao Hua an essential understanding of the way of life and death in the way of heaven, which greatly promoted his cultivation. These factors piled up in the past. Xiao Hua's cultivation was bound to advance by leaps and bounds, but he just didn't have an opportunity. And the ink sand and ink bow in the ink Zhao black forest were exactly this opportunity. An opportunity to compress time. An opportunity to transform a huge amount of Earth's spiritual energy into true essence. Moreover, the early stage of foundation establishment was only the beginning of true cultivation. Xiao Hua was comprehending the way of heaven, so how could he encounter any bottlenecks? If the earth crystal Yao milk hadn't been corroded too much by the ink sand, Xiao Hua would have been close to the late stage of foundation establishment. Of course, if the earth crystal Yao milk hadn't been corroded by the ink sand and wasted a lot of heaven and earth spiritual energy, Xiao Hua's meridians would have burst long ago. As for whether Xiao Hua could survive or not, that was another matter. In addition, if he used the earth crystal Yao milk in the ink Zhao black forest and tried to increase his cultivation by leaps and bounds again, Xiao Hua probably wouldn't agree even if he was killed on the spot. No matter what, Xiao Hua had already entered the middle stage of foundation establishment. This was something worthy of celebration. However, Xiao Hua, who had always been careful, didn't rejoice for too long. After all, he had entered the middle stage of foundation establishment in a hurry, so his realm was still unstable. He also didn't dare to be negligent. He still sat cross-legged, his eyes focused on his nose and his nose focused on his heart. He focused his mind and calmly operated his mental cultivation method, cycle after cycle, carefully cultivating. In the depths of the ink Zhao black forest, there was a barren area. There weren't any black trees, nor were there any vines. In that extremely dark area, there was actually some light on the ground. Several strange, spiritual beasts quickly flitted across it. -8. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.